and one from Sonia Okuzali. Members have agreed the program motion, and I shall be moving the meeting on accordingly. And members are asked to keep to the agreed timing. Thank you. The clerk will now explain what other papers have been circulated.
Good evening, Council Assembly, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. In addition to the agenda papers which were circulated 7 working days before this meeting, we also have an open supplemental agenda number 1, which has the public questions, community evidence requests, deputation requests, and amendments to motions. We have also have the papers that have been circulated by email this evening and are also tabled for members. And these are members' questions and responses, the late question and response, responses to public questions, and the program motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We will now be moving on to the part of the agenda relating to disclosure of interest and dispensation. Do any members wish to make any declaration of interest? When making your declaration, can you please specify if it is a disclosable pecuniary interest, and please state the nature of the interest. Any members who declare a disclosable pecuniary interest in an item will be asked to leave the meeting for that item. When the item has been voted on, they will be welcome to return to the meeting. Are there any declaration of interest? No, there's no declaration of interest. We will now be moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Can we approve the minutes of the meeting of the Council Assembly held on 20th of May, 2023 as a correct record? Is that agreed?
That's fine.
As part of the program motion, it was agreed that the meeting should finish at 10 p.m. We will now be moving on to item 2.1 of item 2 of the agenda itself. We shall move on to issues raised by the public. There are no petitions this evening. We'll be moving on to questions from the public. There are 16 questions from the public this evening. The answers to the questions have been circulated by email and are available on the Council's website. There is up to 15 minutes available for public question time. Public questionnaires have the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, not make a speech. I now invite Judy Piven to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash, Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency, Clean Air and Streets. I would ask if, is there Judy Piven here today? No. Okay, I will now be moving on to the second public question, which is from Karen Greenhead. Karen Greenhead here today? We'll move on to the third public questionnaire. It's Richard Kennick. Mr. Richard Kennick, yes. If you would like to come up to the front.
Thank you very much. Any of these seats at the table in front, the mic will go on automatically. Yep.
Yes, if you sit down in the yes. No. Mr. Kennick, if you have any supplementary question for Councillor James McCash, Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency, Clean Air and Street, you can ask it now.
You say that it is unfair in your response for car owners to pay for maintaining the streets, but that those in a few areas do not. On this basis, how is it fair that car owners with off-street parking make no contribution to highway maintenance?
Thank you very much, Richard, for your question and for your supplemental. So we are rolling out controlled parking zones, parking permit systems across the borough, and that's based on a simple principle of fairness, where up until now we've had a very kind of patchwork approach, which has led to some areas of the borough having to contribute towards the provision of on-street parking, and some, by coincidence, historical coincidence, being able to receive that for free. I don't think it is fair for people in Camberwell or Bermondsey to have to pay for something that people in Dulwich Village and Nunhead receive for free. And that is the principle that we're rolling out. You're absolutely correct that those of the people who have off-street parking do not have to pay towards the towards their parking to the council. But I guess the key difference there is our publicly owned streets are owned by all of us, and therefore if you want to park your private property on it, that is of course fine, but you have to contribute towards doing so. You're absolutely right that parking is only one part of the costs that the council incurs in facilitating car use, and if we were able to roll this out more broadly, we'd want to do so. But I think that's a good example where we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good, and the rollout of controlled parking zones across the borough is a way of instilling fairness in what we do. Thank you very much for your question, but I think I've answered it. Thanks.
I would like to thank Mr. Kennick for attending this evening. I now invite Chris
You're
Clary
welcome to ask
to
that
ask a
question.
supplementary question of Councillor James McCash. Chris Clary, in attendance? No. I'll now invite Carl Person to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash.
Yeah. Go grab a seat for Bev. She's good with time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The response to my question was, as part of the Streets for People strategy, we have a specific theme for streets for the economy, and any proposed parking controls will aim to support these aspirations in businesses by ensuring space for loading, unloading, and good turnover of spaces outside shops. Can you please be specific or provide any more details in terms of the specific theme for Streets for the Economy, and, if possible, any specific parking controls that would be imposed as part of this scheme?
Thank you very much, Carl, for your question, for your supplemental question there as well. So Streets for People is a very exciting strategy. I wish I had a copy in front of me, but I neglected to bring it. But there are many available. Oh my God, Councillor Rose has brought one. Here it is. Thank you so much, Catherine. One part of this strategy is Streets for the Economy, and that's about saying, how can we use our publicly owned streets, not just for journeys, but also for community interaction, for nature, and indeed for the local economy. So at the moment, we're rolling out parking controls across the few remaining parts of the borough that do not have them, and we're consulting not on whether to introduce parking controls, but on how to do so. So we're really keen to hear from local traders, from local businesses, how the parking controls can support them in their particular environments. So for instance, you might have right now in uncontrolled parking areas instances where people can park right outside someone's shop for the whole day, meaning that customers cannot access those businesses. So what we're looking to do is to be much more targeted in our approach to the street space in a way that balances the needs of the local economy with those other requirements as well. So for instance, if it's a small corner shop, we can put in bays that are only for half an hour so we can pop in, grab things and leave. If for instance outside a hairdresser's or a restaurant, you might want longer periods. And that's the kind of consultation, kind of engagement we want to do with local residents to make sure that our street spaces, which are enjoyed and owned by all of us, can really be to the benefit of the local economy. Thank you again for your question.
I would like to thank our person for his supplementary question. I would now invite Nicole Richards to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash.
We can say this. That's literally in the middle of his speech. He was still talking actually on.
Hello, everyone. So my question is to Councillor McCash as well. Nunhead Ward does not need or want a congestion, controlled parking zone to ease congestion or to control through traffic, which is what parking controls are supposed to be about, and we don't need them. In your blog post of June 2019, you said it is illegal for the council to introduce controlled parking on our local streets just to raise revenue. And you also said controlled parking should only be implemented with the consent of residents in any zone. Has the law changed since then? And yeah, has the law changed since then? Is it still the same or has it changed? That's my question.
Daniel, do you think it could be a faulty
Thank you very
behaviour?
much, Nicole, for your question. It feels like only yesterday that we were last talking, but it was, of course,
Should
Monday morning at Cabinet. So thank you very much for coming in to
Someone
ask the
sing
question.
actually.
So ultimately, Nicole, what you pointed out is the change of approach the council has taken to how we roll out parking permits. And I think it's a really great opportunity to explain very, very clearly what that change is. So up until 2019, we had an approach where residents, and when I say residents, I primarily mean drivers, came forward and said there's parking pressure on my street. Can you please introduce a permit system to reduce that pressure? We would ask residents whether they wanted that. When I say residents, again, I primarily mean car owners, and they would tell us
I'm just going to set
whether they
this.
did or not.
I always
Our
use it.
approach has now changed. We're looking at our street space as a whole. We're recognizing the needs of 60% of households who do not own a car, but who nonetheless own our streets collectively. And we're working out how we can use this publicly owned asset, this really valuable asset, our street space, for the benefits of communities, for nature, and for the local economy, as well as, of course, promoting active and safe journeys, cleaning the air, encouraging healthy lifestyles. The law has not changed. The wording that I put there back in 2019 is still correct. You cannot introduce a permit system solely, I think the word is just, to raise revenue, and we are not doing that. We have a very complete strategy outlining the many, many benefits of how we can use our street space to much more advantageous ways than simply allowing for free, unrivaled access to cars, people to park their private property on the public space. We're still allowing that, of course, people will still be able to do that, but that will not be the default option. We'll also be looking at the range of other ways in which we can use our street space for the benefit of all. Thank you very much for your question. I look forward to hearing from you again, and I think 20 minutes or so at the deputation.
I'd like to thank Nicole Richard for attending this evening. I'll now invite the Mayor to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash. Is Eda Mayor in attendance? It does not appear so. I'll now invite Neil Watson to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash.
Members and ladies and gentlemen, before coming here tonight, I took a hard look at the Labour Manifesto 2022. And although it clearly states Labour will put residents at the heart of everything we do, the reality is something different. In the same document, I can't find mention of the restrictions being forced upon car owners in the name of controlled parking. Will you therefore, Cabinet member, please give the exact same assurances to the residents of Nunhead, Queen's Road and Peckham Rye that you gave to your own constituents before reaching any decision?
Thank you very much, Neil, for your question and for your supplemental question. So our policy on controlled parking permits, which I've just explained at some length a moment ago, changed in 2019 with the introduction of the movement plan, which is of course before the last election, before the voters of Southwark returned a big majority to the Labour administration. It was since reinforced through the Southwark's climate action, Southwark climate action plan. Which was, it came up with the #1 priority of residents across the borough was to make walking great again, and part of that is about redistributing space from cars to pedestrians, cyclists, and people who want to use the street space in the community. I want to be really, really clear here that the policy has indeed changed. So pointing out things that I said before the policy changed, when I described the previous policy, isn't a gotcha, because the policy has changed and I've explained how it has changed. It's also worth noting that this is a policy that is not applying exclusively to Nunhead. I appreciate that you are from Nunhead, but the residents across all Southwark streets will have the same thing applied to them. It is a simple point of fairness that the same service, which is on-street parking, it cannot be the case that residents in Camberwell and Bermondsey have to pay for that, and people in Dulwich Village and Nunhead get that for free. That is simply unfair and unjust. And frankly, I think if we were to do a borough-wide consultation on whether Nunhead and Dulwich should have special treatment, I don't think that the people of Camberwell and Bermondsey would return a very strong yes vote for that. So that is why we're rolling out the borough-wide permit system to free up space for streets for people, for the community, the local economy, for nature, and for safe and active journey. Thank you very much, Neil.
I would like to thank Neil Watson for attending this evening. I now invite Amber Dalton to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash. Amber Dalton, it does not appear Amber Dalton is here. I'll now invite Daisy Moon to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash. No. I'll now invite Jordan Thomas to ask a supplementary questions of Councillor James McCash. No. I'll now ask Nancy Spencer to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash. No. I'll now ask Aidan Spencer to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash. No. I'll now ask Ms. Baines to ask a supplementary question of Councillor James McCash. No. I'll now ask Khadijatu Donye to ask a supplementary questions of Councillor James McCash. No, and you'll be pleased to hear finally, I'll now ask no. That brings to an end the public question aspect of the agenda. We now move the meeting to the teamed debate, which is on health and well-being in Southwark. Professor Siobhan Gregory is unavailable to attend this evening, so we will move on to the next community evidence. We shall now consider the second community evidence submission on the theme from the Community Health Ambassadors Network. Can officer please bring forward the requesters?
Yes. It's between speakers. I can't see that being an integrated camera.
If you just have a seat for a moment, and I'll address you very briefly. Thank you for attending this evening. You have 4 minutes in which to address the assembly. You can start.
Everyone, my name is Saran, say 7.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Essay.
We are the community health ambassadors, part of Health Watch Southwark, working in partnership with Community Southwark, the local council, the NHS. We work with universities and schools as well, and other networks. The network is open to virtually anyone that lives and works in Southwark. Everyone's voice is important. Their ambassadors include local residents, faith groups, voluntary sector workers, volunteers, medical professionals, teachers, tenants and residents association representatives, and councillors. Our role is to engage with networks and local communities on topics such as COVID, mental health, learning disabilities, blood pressure. So our primary goal is to improve health and social care for everyone. My role started I joined in February 2021, and I came through from the Tenants and Residents Association because there was an introduction, and they were recruiting for people in the local communities to come and support people in the local communities during COVID. And I was really eager, and I was really interested, and I signed up because I knew I had people in the local communities who were falling ill and they didn't know what to do, and there was nobody reaching out to them. So I got training, and I used the resources that I was provided to provide information to others through websites, WhatsApp, emailing, and just speaking to people. And we're able to support people who were in need of food, to go out, to just provide them support if they needed help, and provide information on vaccinations.
Do you mind if I
people were not, they were very reluctant to have vaccinations.
I just want to clear
They were
all
really
of the
scared, they didn't know what was going on. So that was really signposting people in the community, people to inform them, and just sending out information, just making sure that everyone was well. And also generally, as COVID things improved gradually, we started to get feedbacks. So we'll collect feedbacks on what was happening in the community, what people
Just
wanted.
30 more seconds.
And I'll just pass you over to my other colleague.
Okay, thank you, Medive. We don't have enough time. I just want to share my experience, what I'm doing as a health ambassador. It is for, first of all, I just want to support myself. I decide to help myself and my community at the same time. My role is to engage with moms and babies in my local community Friday and Tuesday. We share experiences, our experiences, and learn together to empower each other, each mom and babies. That now I'm participating with with public health and NHS team at Southwark every Saturday in parks. That is very, very helpful to be bound with the community in the parks. That's amazing when you see people like they access health accessibility, easy to speak with health professional in the parks. That is amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Certainly, it was really good to hear of the important work you do and how you support our community, particularly since the COVID pandemic indeed. We shall now consider, we shall now consider the third committee evidence submission on the team from Rebecca Efiota. Can officers please bring forward the requester?
It's not that bad on the actual Yeah, that's not.
If you pass, have a seat in the middle. Thank you. Thank you for attending this evening. You have 4 minutes in which to address the assembly. I'll probably just give you a gentle reminder at the 30 seconds left point. You may start.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, members of the public. Good evening, all. I'm from Supreme Care Services.
If you bring the microphone.
Is that better?
Yes, you can bring it forward to you as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's better. I'm from Supreme Care Services Limited. I'm a director in Supreme Care Services. I was asked to come to the assembly to present on working in Southwark, and in particular, what difference the Ethical Care Charter has made to our workforce and to Supreme Care as an employer. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with what the Ethical Care Charter is, so I'll just say a word about the Ethical Care Charter. The purpose of the Ethical Care Charter, which was designed by Unison Union, is to ensure that caregivers or care workers have a minimum baseline to ensure they provide safe, quality care to the residents of Southwark and other local authorities, is to ensure they are properly compensated or paid for the work they do. That's the overriding objective of the Charter. Supreme Care Services. We are one of the leading providers in Southwark, and we are committed to the Ethical Care Charter. And what are our commitments? Our commitments are that our workers are paid the London living wage. And we have done that since the inception of the current contract in 2018. We actually pay above the London living wage, and we have done so for the past 5 years. And we also ensure we pay our carers that qualify for statutory sick pay, their SSP, just so that they don't feel pressured to return back to work when they are unwell. Home care workers are also paid their travel time and their travel cost, in addition to the London living wage. And the local authority, Southwark, they monitor our payroll to ensure that these commitments are met, that the care workers are paid the London living wage as a baseline, as a minimum. And in addition, they are paid their travel time and their travel cost. And for all visits and all monitoring that have been done to date, we have satisfied that commitment. What are the benefits of the Ethical Care Charter? Although it has been designed by Unison, it's actually very beneficial to care providers, because local authorities are signed up to the Charter. And for that reason, there is a minimum they pay for the care we provide. And the government had a fair cost of care exercise recently, which is yet to be implemented. I think this will take the Charter even further to ensure that funds are available to make sure carers are provided, care workers are provided the minimum. What's the benefit of a well-paid care worker? A well-paid care worker is more committed. Retention is improved.
30 more seconds.
Because they are earning a decent wage or a wage they can live on. Up until that point, carers were leaving the profession and going to retail and going to hospitality because the wages were not so good. But since the introduction of the Ethical Care Charter, we have been able to retain a lot of our staff. And it also enables us to recruit locally because it becomes a very attractive profession to be in. And with this reduction in turnover of staff, the residents of Southwark have continuity of care. So they have the same care staff providing all their care needs for a more prolonged period of time. And this can only improve the quality of care we provide. It also gives enough time for the caregiver to build a therapeutic relationship with the clients because they feel settled in the profession. So it's a win-win situation for the local authorities, the residents, the care provider, and the care worker as well. I could say more, but I've run out of time.
You've said quite a lot. Thank you very much. I think everyone will agree that it's really good to hear about the impact of the Ethical Care Charter in both raising standards within our care giver industry, but also raising the standards of care in which some of our most vulnerable are receiving in itself. We shall now consider the fourth community evidence submission on the theme from Professor Kevin Fenton. Can officer please bring forward the requester? Yes, please. Thank you for attending this evening. You have 4 minutes in which to address the assembly. I will give you a gentle nudge at the 30 seconds left point.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm Professor Kevin Fenton. I'm the Regional Public Health Director for London. I'm employed with the Department of Health and Social Care and NHS in London. I've been in that role since March 2020. Prior to that, I was the Director of Public Health and Strategic Director of Place and Wellbeing here at Southwark. It's wonderful to be back with you this evening. Colleagues, I have 3 key messages for the session this evening. First, it's to reflect on and to thank you for your work and leadership in navigating the COVID-19 pandemic. Southwark was a beacon of light through some of the darkest times and darkest days of the pandemic. Your innovation, your collaboration, your work and support for testing, contact tracing, community engagement, and the vaccination program was an exemplar to boroughs in London and across the country. My second message is one of recognizing that we've exited the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're now dealing with a number of multiple concurrent threats. These include new infectious diseases from mpox to potentially a large outbreak of measles, a rising tide of non-communicable diseases as many people fell backwards during the pandemic, not being able to engage with regular care. We know that there's significant health system transformation, and that's placing additional pressures on our NHS colleagues as they redevelop and restructure their services. We know that the cost of living crisis is driving more Londoners and more residents in Southwark into poverty, whether food poverty, fuel poverty, and other types of disadvantage, and that has a significant impact on their health and well-being. So any conversation about health and the future of health must take into consideration not just the direct impacts of the pandemic, but the indirect impacts and the legacies of the pandemic. And that brings me then to my third and final point this evening, that as we move forward from the pandemic and as we think about the future of health in this borough, I argue that there are 3 things we should all be doing. First, it is important that all of us lead for health and lead for equity, to understand every opportunity we have to create and ensure well-being is at the center of what we do. Second, important it is to leverage all of the opportunities you have through the transformation of the health and care system so that you take full advantage of the integrated care systems, integrated partnerships and boards to leverage health, recognizing that although health is more than the health system plays a pivotal part. And third, and finally, we must ensure that we not only learn lessons from the pandemic, but we work together to lock in the legacies of the pandemic, true change in behavior, in culture, in the ways we do business that reflect our experiences of going through the pandemic. And if I have time, Mr. Mayor, there are 5 key areas which I think are critical. First, leveraging data and evidence as you did throughout the course of the pandemic. Second, leveraging your partnerships, new and innovative ways of working to truly unlock and drive health. Third, to ensure that health equity and equality and dealing with structural discrimination, including racism, is a part of your narrative and your leadership in the borough. Fourth, to leverage the power of your academic institutions to ensure you have research that works for your communities and helps to improve health. And finally, to build upon the fantastic work you did in the pandemic to engage and mobilize your local communities. That must be part of your solution for driving health in this borough moving forward. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much.
I'd like to thank you, Professor Kevin Fenton, for the words you shared with us this evening. We will now move on to the team motion debate, health and wellbeing in Southwark. Yes.
Do something just slightly unorthodox.
Do you want to stand up, please, Councillor Williams?
Certainly. I just wanted to say a thank you from all of us here to Kevin, who was actually a huge figure in London throughout the pandemic. We lost him at a moment when we probably needed him here, but I was absolutely delighted that he went into the role that he did. I got the privilege of working with him as a leader and all leaders across London, but I think our London response to COVID would not have been as strong as it was if Kevin hadn't been at the front leading our city. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you.
Now onto the team motion. We will now consider the amended team motion as agreed in the programme motion. Councillor Evelyn Akoto, Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing, you have 7 minutes in which to present the team debate and the motion on the team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On 5th July 1948, the National Healthcare Service was born due to the determination of a post-war Labour government. This project was based on a founding principle that its service would be free at the point of need. 75 years on, and these principles are still relevant and needed today as it was then. When we mention the NHS, most of us are filled with pride and great work that they do. 75 years of staff working in difficult conditions to save lives. We only have to look back to the pandemic to understand the level of sacrifice our NHS and social care staff made. And I want to take this opportunity to thank a midwife I met 14 years ago at St. Thomas's Hospital by the name of Nikki. She listened to my distress and literally saved the life of my firstborn child, and perhaps mine too. I've never forgotten her. And it's these personal stories that drives us to fight to keep and improve our health service. So to Nikki and colleagues across health and care, we are forever grateful. And we could not think of the NHS at 75 without remembering the arrival of the Empire Windrush 13 days earlier on 22nd June 1948. People from the Caribbean and diverse backgrounds arrived in the country, many of the ship's passengers taking up jobs in the NHS. So to the Windrush generation, we remain grateful for your sacrifice. However, over the decades of the NHS has faced huge pressures, 13 years of damaging cuts, instigated by Conservative and Liberal Democrats coalition. This has put in doubt the future of our health and care service and has weakened our social safety net. Southwark is diverse, But after 30 years of disastrous budget cuts, our residents are experiencing health and care system not in the same way. Poverty, racism, and inequalities have caused inequality in access, experience, and outcome. However, as a council, we continue to push against the tide, to be proactive, using every leverage, as was mentioned, available to us to make bold policies that tackles the growing societal differences. So in a few minutes, I will briefly share with you the journey of some of our flagship work to showcase our commitment to building on years of successes to improve the health and well-being of our borough. In 2013, faced with the heartbreaking cases of children going hungry during school days, we rolled out free healthy school meals for all our primary school children. In 2020, we completed our pledge to extend this provision to all maintained nurseries and nursery classes, school nursery classes. And next year, because of the strides that we have already made, I am proud to say we will be piloting free healthy school meals for our secondary school, led by Councillor Ali and supported by Public Health. Our food security work does not stop there. As the cost of living crisis continues to soar, we know the lack of access to affordable nutritious food are associated with increased health risks, such as obesity, mental health disorder, to name a few. And in particular, our partnership work with Southwark Food Alliance, we've implemented a raft of policies to tackle household food insecurity, such as supporting the development of community fridges, pantries, neighborhood food models to provide more dignity and community food resilience, developing an extensive holiday food and fun program, providing healthy food and activity for school-age children and families experiencing hardship. And in recognition of the great work by my public health team, I am proud that Southwark is one of only 4 councils in London to be recognized this year as cross-cutting leaders in our work. But we are not done. Work is already currently taking place to realize our 2022 manifesto pledge to make Southwark a right to food borough. But what about social care? For far too long, social care has been treated as the poor relation in the health family. But it's my firm belief that the future of the NHS is dependent on sorting out the social care crisis. We cannot, for example, relieve the issue of lack of beds in our hospitals if this government is not prepared to tackle 165 job vacancies that is instrumental in ensuring care packages are available to free up these beds. And in Southwark, we recognize this. That's why in 2013, we were the first council to sign up to the Unison's Ethical Care Charter. And in 2022, was the first local authority to agree a residential care charter that aims to improve the pay and working conditions of all our residential care staff in the borough. But I'm not standing here suggesting that we've got it all figured out. We have more work to do to ensure our expectation regarding safe and high quality care is a reality. And as we deal with an aging population, we are creating much needed nursing homes so that all older residents who need care can continue to have home in our borough. And we are extending this focus of support to our unpaid carers who play a vital role in the lives of so many. They are looking after others. We must also look after them. The improvement that occurred under the late Labour government demonstrates that if the political will exists and we are minded to fight for it, our health services is capable of reform and will survive. We need healthcare funding to increase in line with the demand from our aging population. Gaps in social care funding must be filled, and there must be a fundamental change in social care funding and provision. There must be a credible and fully funded workforce plan for the NHS and social care, and public health must be given priority. A sustained commitment to prevention and early intervention to tackle the wider determinants of health and reduce inequality is crucial, and the public must be fully engaged in improving health and care, such as we've heard from the health ambassadors. That is why we need a Labour government now and not in a year's time. A government that will value our borough's healthcare needs and work in partnership to address the systemic funding issues. We know that there are tough choices ahead, but I look forward with much optimism. If there's anything I will ask of members here today, is to continue to be champions for our health services, making sure and making the case for adequate funding and reform to ensure that this vital service is also there for our children's children and will be free at the point of need. Thank you.
Thank you. The lead opposition spokesperson will now have an opportunity to reply to the cabinet member's statement and speak to Amendment A. Councillor Rachel Bentley will be speaking on behalf of Councillor Maria Linford All. You have 5 minutes in which to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm reading this speech on behalf of my colleague, Maria Linford Hall, who cannot be here tonight as she is by the bedside of her husband, Tony, who is gravely ill and in hospital. This speech was written by both of them, and I hope that I can do them justice by delivering it on their behalf. I have decided to talk about the support for elderly because I speak with experience. I am the oldest councillor in Southwark, as I will be 78 this August. Although I do not feel that I am yet too old to be effective. Growing older means having a wide range of experiences and going through changes. Growing old for me has meant that I have more experiences and I hope wisdom. So this evening, I want to concentrate on some of these issues which are of particular relevance to our older residents. The first is the availability of public toilets. This can be a problem which prevents older residents from going out at all. Even if there is a cafe or a pub, it can be embarrassing and even humiliating to beg to use their facilities. The next point that I want to emphasize is the protracted wait for appointments at the pain management clinics. I have personal experience of this as I've been waiting for an appointment for a year. The conditions that these clinics deal with are more common and more limiting among the elderly, and we intend to examine this through the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission. And finally, there is the persistent problem of damp and black mold in housing stock. This again is a danger to health that affects the old disproportionately as they spend more time indoors. So we must be proactive by identifying buildings, estates, and areas with consistent damp and mold issues using data collected by the repairs team. And tackling the root causes of damp and mold in these problem areas with targeted proactive repairs and repairs action days. For elderly residents, their homes are their sanctuaries. So we need to help them promptly with repairs and facilitate a way to report them. Most seniors do not have confidence or access to computers or even smartphones. Many have visual impairments or hearing limitations. There are several factors that can influence digital exclusion, age, disability, and socioeconomic status being some of them. Given that digital exclusion increases with age, there are important questions about how the increased reliance on technology in our society has affected the older population, often making it impossible for them to renew blue badge permits or report repairs. 10 million people in the UK lack the basic foundational skills needed to participate in today's society, and nearly 2 million over 75-year-olds in England are digitally excluded, according to Age UK. I meet many seniors at the St George's Community Fridge, which operates every Friday at the Amigo Hall. They go there for company, so we provide them with a healthy breakfast, and they tell me of their problems. Health and mobility are, of course, major issues for the elderly, but there are also social issues such as loneliness and financial worries. They can become socially isolated for a variety of reasons, such as no longer being the hub of their family, leaving the workplace, death of spouses and friends, or through disability or illness. And we should be alert to these pressures and offer our help when we see them. Thank you, Mr.
Mayor. As part of the program motion, the meeting has agreed to have a combined debate on the motion and the amendment. I have a list of members who have indicated they would like to speak. I'll call them in order. Each councillor gets 3 minutes, and I would ask if councillors could stick to the 3 minutes. I'll now call Councillor Gavin Edwards to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to speak about an issue which is very close to my heart, which is the social care sector. I should say up front that in my day job, I'm the lead officer on social care for Unison, which is the largest union in the care sector. Social care should be considered as much a core, vital, essential public service as the NHS. But the truth is that because of the policies of the national government, instead we have a broken, fragmented, acutely underfunded social care system, which is often more focused on delivering profits for private providers than it is on providing high quality social care for the disabled and the elderly. Every day I hear heart-wrenching stories from our care sector members in Unison who are desperate to do a good job for the people that they are caring for, but can't because the system holds them back. We have domiciliary care workers who are not paid for their travel time. We have huge vacancy rates, which leave care home workers literally sprinting between care recipients in order to get round the people they need to care for. We have care workers put under huge financial pressure to attend work when they are sick because there is no sick pay. They then go into work sometimes tragically and can pass those conditions on to the people that they care for. The list goes on and on and on. We've got 0 hours contracts everywhere in the care sector, people underpaid for sleep-in shifts, migrant workers exploited, 15-minute care visits, no workforce plan, no sustainable funding, constant passing of the buck by the Secretary of State at national level. It's got to stop. Now, I should say, I am very proud that this council has done its absolute best to get rid of the worst excesses of this system that we suffer with nationally. The Ethical Care Charter and the Residential Care Charter are transformative, both for the people working in social care in this borough and for people receiving social care. And we should all be very proud that that is delivered in our borough. It was great to hear Rebecca talking about that earlier. Absolutely. Well, what we need now is another historic moment like the creation of the NHS. We need a national government which addresses which delivers a new national care service, still run by councils, empowered councils, but with national standards on pay and conditions for care workers, national standards on care, on the behaviour of care providers, and fair national funding settlement for councils so they can deliver a high quality service. I look forward one day to this council being proud to deliver our part of a national care service that is as beloved an institution as the NHS is today. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Jasmine Ali to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations on your new mayoralty. Mr. Mayor, I want to thank Councillor Okoto and her team for her motion. Tonight, I want to talk about children and young people's wellbeing and mental health. Right now, nationally, children's wellbeing is at a 10-year low. 1 in 6 are unhappy, 1 in 6 have a mental health issue, and of them, some 60% will never get treatment. In Southwark, we can and we do much better for our children and young people. Our vision is to support 100% of children and young people with mental health needs. And what does that look like? We have invested 2 million in our schools to deliver on prevention. At the height of the COVID pandemic, we opened up a free mental health drop-in. And this has been a tremendous success and, you know, has had a phenomenal impact. Meeting 100% of mental health needs in Southwark now looks like 40% are supported through the mental health drop-in, the nest. We've also got people going from the drop-in into schools, practitioners doing outreach. We've got 20+% in other commissioned services, like our Link service that provides mental health support to children with care experience. And we've got 35% supported by CAMS. But the NHS needs to be more responsive. Even in Southwark, there is still a 10-month, better than most, but still a 10-month waiting list for CAMS. So the fact that the Nest and other services are there holding our children and young people while they wait for such support is important. There is also growing evidence to show that how neurodiverse conditions like ADHD and autism are accompanied by mental health challenges. And I now want to take the focus and shine the spotlight on special education needs and/or disabilities. Look, we support children with special needs in Southwark and we are proud of our service, make no bones about it. But for many of our residents, your casework and my own experience, that national sense system is just not right. Last week, I was in a meeting with a civil servant who said that one would have to be, this is a civil servant, one would have to be on mind-altering drugs to understand the current national system for children and young people with special needs. In Southwark, we have 9,000 children with special needs. We have 3,500 children on EHCPs. The vision now must be for child and parent-centred service for children and young people, starting in Southwark. They're looking for a national exemplar. We're going to give them one. We have a new assistant director starting soon, and her name is Anna Cheever. Now, that is her name. And her first task will be to reset our special education needs or disabilities service.
Thank you.
To do even better by our children. And on work on our children's health, our work on our children's mental health has been a national exemplar. You will see it in the Tory manifesto, and you'll definitely see it in the Labour manifesto, because we are showing
Thank you,
what
Councillor
it's like
Jasmine.
to have.
I call on Councillor Victor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I start by congratulating Councillor Hussain on your recent election and welcome you to your first council meeting. Whilst we were all out campaigning across Newington, it was very hard to ignore a perennial, a pernicious and a preventable issue that is damaging residents' health and putting lives at risk, that of damp and mould. I remember meeting a mum on polling day on the Newington estate. I'll call her T to protect her identity. T was literally in tears because of the way that damp and mould was impacting her family. Not only was she living in an overcrowded council home with 2 children, but her child's life was being cut short by damp and mould in their home. Her child was wheezing through the night because the mould was exacerbating her asthma. T was having to sleep next to a wet wall, and that was taking its toll on her health too. The family has to store belongings in their bath to keep them dry in what is already an overcrowded home. T said she was planning to vote Liberal Democrat because she needed change. And after years of raising these issues with the council, nothing had been done. This is not a Dickensian novel. This is Southwark in 2023. I've written to T and I've offered her my help. But we all know that T's case is not a one-off. It's appallingly too common in this borough. Good quality homes and healthy homes are a basic right and a key building block to health. The Housing Ombudsman in May ordered Southwark to pay £7,500 for severe maladministration after a family was left with extensive damp and mould for 17 months. In January, a resident was tragically found dead in what was described as swamp-like conditions. Neighbours had alerted the council 9 months prior, but the council took no action. Last year, there were nearly 500 formal complaints about damp and mould to Southwark Council. In 2010, the Housing Ombudsman named Southwark as one of the worst landlords in the whole country for dealing with damp and mould. And as recently as November of last year, Southwark's website was trying to blame residents for, like T, for stating that it was their responsibility to reduce condensation and mould. We have a member's motion tonight on damp and mould, but bizarrely, given the way that we do Council Assembly, it's unlikely it will actually get debated. But we should all be clear that the council's current response is lacklustre and insufficient. The motion in front of the council offers solutions that we need and a holistic system to tackle this blight. The Damp and Mould Task Force is a welcome start, but it can only be a first step. We need a zero tolerance approach with better information sharing to tackle root causes of damp and mould. We need more repair action days. We need to demand better from our housing associations and from private landlords. and we need to hold them to account on that. And ultimately, we also need to show greater transparency ourselves as the council about what we're doing to tackle this health hazard and threat to Southwark residents' lives. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll now call Councillor Sam Dalton to address the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. On its 75th birthday, there's no doubt that the NHS is at a critical juncture, and that nationally, the austerity of the last 13 years has combined with the lack of reform to prioritise prevention and keeping people healthier for longer to create the current crisis. Nationally, we do need the party of the NHS back in power so this can be fixed. But locally, we are already fighting for the best NHS possible through Labour's actions and commitments. It's great to see this motion highlighting the many different areas of council policy that are having an impact on improved health and well-being, from reducing inequalities to providing the highest standards of social care, and from increased access to affordable food through to mental health support. Focusing specifically on the NHS is itself vital, but so are all of these other drivers of health and well-being that ultimately help us all to live better and in the end result in a stronger NHS too. And one great example of this collaborative working that we're leading across the council is actually between health, social care and housing. This motion highlights our commitment to ensuring quality care in Southwark, and we are putting in place a preventative approach by not just ensuring high quality nursing and care homes, but also through people getting care in their own homes and building new extra care housing, both of which keep people healthier and independent for longer and reduce health problems and costs in the long term. And housing isn't just crucial for improving the health of the user of the NHS, but for supporting brilliant health and care staff too, as we also commit to in this motion. The Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission inquiry this year on GP appointments found that housing costs were a key driver of GPs moving out of the borough and contributing to a mismatch between GP numbers and demand. And that's why Labour's commitment to building 500 homes for key workers at rents they can afford is so crucial for health and care workers and health and care services, and why the Commission has recommended this commitment is built upon. And I'm particularly excited to see the key worker homes that will be built soon on the site of the former Birmingham Community Centre in my London Bridge and West Bermondsey ward, alongside a great new community space. So as well as campaigning for Labour to be back in power nationally, we are committed to ensuring that locally we are linking up all different possible policy areas and improving health and well-being through every single avenue possible. Labour is the party of the NHS, and we will continue to show that in Southwark.
I call on Councillor Victoria Mills to address the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The NHS crisis that we've been talking about, fundamentally is a workforce crisis. Pay cuts, worsening conditions, and 13 years without a clear workforce plan to tackle the health challenges of the 21st century. As demand increases and waiting list grows, our inability to recruit and retain staff is at the heart of many of the issues that have been raised tonight. There are 150 social care vacancies in England, 115,000 NHS vacancies. The vacancy rate for nurses is running at 12%. There are shortages in every single healthcare profession, so speech and language therapists, dietitians, midwives. And if I think of lots of debates we've had in this chamber over the years, I can relate them back to those wider public sector jobs. So whether that's childhood obesity, failing maternal health services for Black and ethnic minority women, or developing effective and innovative programs to improve sexual health in our communities. This workforce crisis has a direct impact on us as patients. Our access to high quality care, or even access to care, is reduced. For NHS and care staff, the workforce crisis adds to the pressures and stresses of already incredibly demanding roles. So sickness rates for NHS staff are growing. Leaving rates for healthcare staff are higher than seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this crisis has been made by 13 years of Tory government. But as we wait for that Labour government that's going to fix these problems, we should be debating what we as Southwark Council should do. So as Councillor Dalton has already drawn attention to, the issue of housing, if 1 in 3 new council homes being built is currently in Southwark, why can't 1 in 3 new key worker homes be here too? And we should look to brilliant examples that other councils are using. So the Northern Care Alliance has worked with local councils to develop a programme to support care leavers and unaccompanied asylum-seeking children into NHS careers. 80% of the young people who've been helped have gone on to jobs in the NHS. We're really ambitious for our care leavers in Southwark. We're committed to being a borough of sanctuary. What a really great example of combining council priorities and meeting the challenges that the NHS faces. The government's current plan for NHS recruitment includes a plan that 1 in 6 new jobs should be apprenticeships. What are we doing to make sure that our promised 2,000 apprenticeships and 3,000 training opportunities for local people are linked with our local hospitals and universities to really ensure that those promised apprenticeships come here to Southwark in health and social care and are opportunities for Southwark residents? How can we work with LSBU to improve the offer of allied health professional education here in Southwark? What can we do to promote opportunities with local schools, brokering work experience placements to encourage them into those health careers? So finally, Nye Bevan wrote about staffing shortages in 1948. He said this was critical. He said workers were vital to the successful operation of the new health service. Vital in 1948 and still vital now in 2023.
I call on Councillor Irina Van-Wezer.
Here, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk about mental health, but I'm afraid it's not quite as positive as the picture that Councillor Ali painted. And I want to talk about mental health for everyone, not just for children. When we talk about health equality, mental health can affect anyone, but disproportionately it affects those who suffer from social deprivation, and it's been exacerbated by the current cost of living crisis. Now, 1 in 3 people will experience some form or another of depression and anxiety, the most common forms of mental health problems, at least once in their lives, and many of them, like me, on a chronic basis. And unfortunately, although there was a lot of talk about mental health, the theory is still not quite matched by the practice. And in my own experience, not only here in Southwark, but across London, the provision for mental health is still not good enough and very patchy. And in particular, what we know that people suffering from severe depression need is a combination of medication and talking therapy. And that is simply not available. We heard from Councillor Ali, there are still waiting times of up to 10 months for some form of psychotherapy. And instead, patients are being offered drugs very easily, but they often are not effective, or they're an overkill and they can lead to severe side effects and potentially addiction. Or they're offered some form of online cognitive behavioral therapy, which we know is not enough for many forms of anxiety and depression. But what they really need is access to a therapist. And waiting for 10 months is simply not good enough if you are too ill to function in your life, but you're not ill enough to be sectioned and going to hospital. If you're not suicidal, but you are still severely depressed, I think you still fall between the cracks in this system. It is not good enough. And I think we need at all levels, national level, but also local level, we still have a lot of catching up to do to make sure that mental health is really being treated equally to physical health. Thank you.
I'll now call on Councillor Esme Dobson.
In 2019, Boris Johnson stood on the steps of Downing Street and said that he was going to fix social care, but he didn't. The government did introduce a health and social care levy last year, which could have helped, but then a few months later and a new Prime Minister later, that plan was then scrapped. A few weeks ago, the Fabian Society produced a report which apparently may or may not form the basis of a new policy on social care for a new Labour government, which we will probably be getting next year. Personally, I think it's time that we stopped waiting for somebody at the top to fix social care. Local government is currently responsible for social care and we spend a significant part of our budget on it, but we rarely talk about it. If we did talk about it more, we could discuss, for example, how much we really wanted to spend on it. We currently spend 22% of our budget on adult social care, but there are no rules about how much of the budget we're allowed to spend on it. We could spend more if we wanted to. As far as I can see, all human beings have pretty similar needs. We all need to sleep, we all need to eat, and we have a range of other needs. Too often, when it comes to people who need social care, these most basic of needs are not even met. I'm sure the majority of people in this room take it completely for granted that they can have a shower in the morning, that they can go to the loo whenever they want to, that they can pop out to the shops if they need something, or simply go for a walk to get some fresh air. Such basics are far from guaranteed if you're somebody who relies on social care. And I'm not just talking about old people with dementia here, I'm talking about working age disabled people too. There are plenty of people in this room who have children, and I'm sure none of you found raising children to be a walk in the park. Imagine how much harder it could have been if you'd had a child that was disabled from birth. If anyone saw the recent sitcom, There She Goes, you'll understand what I mean. I challenge anyone to find that programme to be easy viewing. One line that sticks in my mind from that programme is the mother pleading, why can't people just cut us some slack when her daughter's nursery tells her that they're struggling to meet her needs? I think that's exactly what our role in local government should be, to cut some slack to families who are having it harder than most. The Fabian report suggests that we should expand open access preventative services. The bottom line is that preventative services such as day centres and respite services are what keeps unpaid carers going. And if those unpaid carers don't keep going and the care breaks down at home, then it ultimately becomes more expensive for the local authority if the state has to take over. The report also suggests that we could offer free support for disabled people at birth, for people disabled at birth. We could do that tomorrow if we thought that that was important enough. So I support the motion and everything we've already committed to do, but I also think we could go further and implement some of the elements of the Fabian report before being given permission from somebody at the top to do so. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Catherine Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public Health England estimate that Black, Asian and global majority people have between a 10 to 50% higher risk of premature death compared to white people. All people from lower socioeconomic groups are twice as likely to be inactive than the affluent. It's estimated that only 4 in 10 women are active and 1 in 3 men. If current obesity rates continue, we will see the rising cost of obesity top 9.7 billion by 2050. So we must strive to ensure that gender, ethnicity, heritage or income are not barriers to good health, physical activity and the benefits of community sport and leisure. Regular activity reduces the risk of illness and disease. It's recommended that children have 60 minutes of physical activity a day and that adults participate in 30 minutes of moderate exercise each day as well. The perfect exercise is walking and cycling for those that can. And if you are regularly active, you can reduce and prevent the prevalence of illness and disease. So regular activity reduces dementia by 35%, your risk of cardiovascular disease by 35%, type 2 diabetes by 40%, breast cancer by 20%, hip fractures 68% and depression by 20%. For every £1 spent on community sport and physical activity, Sport England estimate that we create a net gain of £3.91. That's a 4-to-1 ratio in value. We spend around 21 billion on the engagement of sport and delivery of physical activity in this country, but it generates a net value and a social value of over 71 billion. The largest part of that is an estimated 41 billion on the benefits to mental well-being and an estimated 20 billion on the support for stronger, safer communities by individual and group participation in sport. The benefits on physical health are real and tangible. That 21 billion spent prevents 150,000 cases of heart disease, which saves the NHS £1 billion a year. It prevents or delays 900,000 diabetes cases, saving 3.6 billion. 8,500 cancer cases, saving 460 million, and prevents or delays 375 depression cases, saving us 110 million. And it prevents 30 million fewer GP visits, saving the NHS £450 million a year. Sport England and the local authority sector are in firm agreement about the future for public sport and community provision. We must see an alignment of leisure services with physical and mental health services and social care. We must focus on place-based provision, placing leisure centres and other infrastructure at the heart of the offer that we develop for all our communities. And we must make sure that that provision is low carbon, looking at innovation and new locations and ways in which we can deliver good public health.
Thank you.
And we must focus on strong public sector leadership, which is what we're about to do here in Southwark. And the past 75 years of the NHS have been dominated by treating those already ill. The next 75 years has to be about prevention of illness and the delay of chronic acute conditions. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Kieran Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't actually expecting to speak, but I'll briefly say a couple of words. I think it's been fantastic to hear such contributions this evening. And I know from my own experience that our NHS is a fundamentally powerful thing. And it makes me think of when my grandparents came to the end of their lives and the care they got. It makes me think of when my father had cancer. It makes me think of when my children were born and when I struggled with my own mental health. As there was a service that was absolutely there for me and my family at every stage of my life, from cradle to grave. But there is a real gap here, isn't there, in social care? We are doing impressive things in Southwark, the ethical care charter, the residential care charter, mental health provision for young people. So there really is an opportunity to get mental health support when you need it. Those are things that are not available across the rest of the country. People are not getting those basics, as I would call them, and they are basics. But clearly there is so much more we need to do. It is a scandal that mental health support is not available for people for months and years when you need acute support. It is a scandal that social care is not fully funded to provide the support that any of us would want for ourselves or our relatives in later life, or in early life, indeed. And it is a scandal that we have a government that has let waiting lists go through the roof for basic care. And perhaps the most scandalous example, and the example of the direction they want to take our NHS again in as well, is dentistry, where you can't even get an NHS dentist for many people in our borough. You can't get basic treatment. And for those that don't have money in their pockets, that means teeth that decay. And it's not just your teeth, it's the rest of your health that comes with that. A service completely taken away from swathes of our community. So we absolutely need change. We need change in our country that delivers care that takes us back to where we were 13 years ago, where you didn't have to wait months, where you could get a GP appointment, where you could get a dentist appointment. But we need to go beyond that, don't we? And we need to build a care system for the century ahead, a care system that provides quality care, social care, as well as healthcare, and a system that is absolutely about supporting people to live long, healthy lives. Learning from the examples of us, building on our mental health support, building on our ethical care and residential care charter, making those things national and going beyond them, so we can have in our country the basics that we should have in any civilized society. And we can, as others have said, in 75 years, we can be proud of our generation's contribution to turning around the offer for our communities.
Thank you. We are now reaching the end of this session, so I shall ask Councillor Akoto to respond to the debate. You have 3 minutes as a maximum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for everyone and your passionate contribution to this subject. I want to respond to so many of you, but I don't have time. So I think I'll pick two. And then to Councillor Mills, really important point about apprenticeship. And I'm really happy to say that we started a discussion with our integrated care partnership at the last meeting about how we increase apprenticeship and rolling it out to our residents. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of realize what you have said today. So what was said about mental health, and it's a sad indictment of our society when you have to wait that long to get mental health support, and something we know that it has been exacerbated since the pandemic. We recently completed a JSNA to set out the community need, and we'll be working with the NHS to make sure that we can expand, improve access and support to mental health for adults in Southwark. But I must say I am deeply touched by Councillor Linford Hall's speech. And as a daughter to a 92-year-old parent, I totally understand the things she has said. My parent is dependent on the family to not be lonely, to make sure that we care for him. He has care workers coming in to allow him to live an independent life as much as possible. And I see everything, the fears, the anxiety that she's just spoken about. I see it also in my parents. So what I will say is that this is very dear to me, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that our elderly communities, our residents of all ages will be supported, and make sure that the health and well-being of our borough continues to improve. Thank you.
I shall now move to the vote on Amendment A. Those in favor of Amendment A?
Seven, Mr. Mayor.
7. Those against?
Mr. Mayor.
44. Any abstentions? None. Amendment A is lost. I shall now move to the vote on the substantive as amended by the program motion. Those in favor of the substantive motion?
44, Mr. Mayor.
44. Those against? None. Abstentions?
7, Mr. Mayor.
7. The substantive motion is carried. We will now move to the next item on the agenda, which is relating to deputation request. It is now time for deputation as part of the program motion. Members agreed to hear 3 deputations from the Kirby Estate Tenants and Residents Association, secondly, from non-ed resident, and thirdly, from Sone Oxtali. Can officers please bring forward the first deputation from Kirby Estate Tenants and Residents Association? Okay, would the deputation spokesperson please address the meeting? You have 4 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, everybody, for listening to us. And my name is Marta Prieto, and I am a representative for the Kirby Estate Tenants and Residents Association. And I'm here with 2 of my neighbors. One is over there, one is over here, Mr. Lee and Mr. Buchanan. We are here because we believe that the installation of the new windows on the Kirby Estate does not comply with building regulations. And this is the cause of the exponential increase in mold that we are having in the state. The problem is there's 180 flats, 118 flats on the Kirby Estate, and as a part of the Quality Homes Improvement Program, new windows were installed, but these were not measured individually. And instead, the contractors ordered one size for all the flats. And they relied on add-ons to fit those to the frames. That might work in new developments where the frames are roughly the same in all the windows, but our estate is nearly 100 years old, so no 2 windows are the same. It just doesn't work. As a consequence of this extreme use of extensions, we have cold flats. There are gaps on the window frames. In the winter, we can feel the draft coming through our necks. That cold combined with the heat and it creates condensation, and that turns into mold. So a problem that was only occasional and restricted to some of the flats, for other problems like damp, filtrations, or ventilation problems, now it is spread to every single one of the flats on the Kirby estate. It's no longer on the bathrooms, it's in our bedrooms, it's in our living rooms, it's in all the flats, except for one. One of our neighbors, who happens to be a very experienced constructor with a lot of experience, he saw the installation and he refused the installation of the windows. He said, "Not in my flat." So we didn't know. We are not builders. We noticed the cold, but we didn't know the combination of the relation of that with the mold problem. But now we do. So what we've done, we created a TRA, and we have been trying to do everything possible to convince Southwark Council that unless remedial works are taken to fix the installation and seal those gaps on the window frames, it doesn't matter how much anti-mold paint they put in the spring. When it comes the winter, we are going to have the same problem again and again and again. The response from the council has invariably been that the installation is fence-approved and that therefore meets the regulatory requirements. FENSA is a self-certifying body that monitors building regulation compliance for replacement of windows and doors. And our site surveyor, Mr. Richard Bellet, signed a report for Southwark Council confirming that he was satisfied with the installation and that the installation was FENSA approved. Mr. Bellet's claim is based on a report of a FENSA registered independent inspection company called RISA. But that report is actually a pre-completion report based on one single flat on the estate, dated September 2020. That was before the rest of the windows were installed. The council is actually currently employing that same company, RISA, to carry out another independent inspection. We disagree with Mr. Bellet's report, and we are actually quite dubious about the using the same company to carry out another inspection. So we asked for a building control officer instead to visit.
Thank you.
Yes,
it is. It is. I mean, do you have a question for the leader of the relevant cabinet member? Because that may well elicit some of the points you're trying to make as well.
Okay, I will get that. My question is for Councillor Darren Merrill. So now it's mid-July. The winter is only 5 months away. It's not fair that our residents, which include babies, elderly residents, people with vulnerable pre-existing conditions, have to choose between being warm or being able to breathe. So my question is, what else can we do to get a building control officer's report so we can move forward and we can get the major works team to take on the remedial works to fix these problems? What else can we do?
Thank you for your deputation. I am pleased to announce that Building Control are doing an inspection on your estate, and I'm expecting a report at the end of July, beginning of August. Once we've got those recommendations brought forward for the remedial works to be done, we will obviously come to your TRA, have that discussion with you, and obviously hold the contractor to account and make sure those works are done. So I'm pleased to say that what you are requesting is being done at the moment. Thank you.
I would like to thank the deputation for attending this evening's. Officer will escort deputation to the public sitting area if you wish to listen to the debate. Can officers please bring forward the second deputation non-aid residents? Please do come in. Would the deputation spokesperson please address the meeting? You have 4 minutes to speak. Would you like a 30 seconds reminder? Okay.
Thank you for hearing our deputation today. We represent businesses and residents of Nunhead, Queens Road and Peckham Rye wards, areas affected by the proposed Queens Road and Nunhead controlled parking zones. We urge the council to rethink its borough-wide CPZ policy and to engage with local residents on a case-by-case basis for more effective solutions. Our cause has received overwhelming support. We have over 3,100 signatures on our change.org petition and a further 300 and some on the e-petition signatories on Southwark's website. We all support the objectives of Streets for People. Who doesn't want improved air quality, safer streets, reduced congestion, more active travel, better green spaces? However, the implementation of a blanket borough-wide CPZ is not the most effective way to achieve these goals. Our area has the best air quality in Southwark. It's free from commuter traffic or parking stress. However, we have the worst public transport in the borough, which puts vulnerable, elderly and unofficial carers at a real disadvantage. We dispute the council's claim that it has a mandate from the Southwark residents to implement a borough-wide CPZ. It wasn't directly mentioned in the Labour Party's manifesto. The council's assertion of extensive consultations is misleading. The 2018 movement plan consultation was just 747 actual Southwark residents with no mention of the CPZ. Yet somehow it found its way into the approved plan, the 2019 movement plan, without any further consultation. And the current Streets for People strategy attempts to disguise the true intention of implementing the control parking everywhere, disregarding local context and residents' opinions. When combined with the council's minimum communication about the CPZ, it is evident that no mandate exists for this blanket action. Furthermore, the council's consultation process violates the gunning principles. Councillor McAsh made a spectacular U-turn of opinion in 2019. The basis given is that it is unfair for non-car owners to pay for highway repairs. Yet the majority of this damage is caused by moving vehicles, not parked cars, that come from outside of the borough. In areas where parking is not an issue, we can implement additional cycle hangers, charging points, tree planting, road crossings without a CPZ. What the council does have is a moral responsibility to consider the broader impact of a CPZ on local residents. And on average, 40% of Southwark owns a vehicle, but that ownership ranges from 25% to 75%. In Nunhead and Queens Road, Peckham and Peckham Rye, the average is 50%. And in Nunhead and Queens Road, we have the highest registered number of disabled residents. It's crucial to recognize that cars serve as a necessity for individuals who deliberately choose to live in our area where parking is not an issue. Roads are for people, not for cars, is fine to say, but it fails to acknowledge that cars are for people as well, and some individuals depend on them. Furthermore, we question the legal basis for the planning of a surplus from parking permits to fund investment in the borough highways. It's important to note that the council is not permitted to generate a surplus solely for the revenue creation, and yet we see this money clearly making up over half of the funding in the local implementation plan. In conclusion, given the lack of a strong mandate, the moral obligation to understand the local impact, the waste of resources associated with an unnecessary scheme, we strongly urge the council to reconsider its policy of a blanket borough-wide CPZ and actively engage with the local residents in each area to achieve our shared goals of improved air quality, reduced car usage, and enhanced green spaces. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Do you have any question for the leader or relevant cabinet member?
Thank you. This is a question for Councillor James McAsh. It's very nice to see you twice in 3 days, almost as frequent as Nunhead's buses. The Department of Transport's guidelines are totally clear in the use of CPZs, and that they are there to solve a problem for a specific local area and should never be used as an alternative taxation or to provide additional source of funding. They should essentially be net to zero. Councillor McCash, do you not recognise that in your pursuit of fairness, by forcing an area with no problem in parking to fund other projects and not consulting local people properly, with this blanket approach, you are in turn creating a situation that ineffectively breaks law in so many ways?
Thank you very much to all the speakers for their deputation. And although I disagree with a lot of what you've said and what a lot of the speakers have said, I do 100% respect that you've come here to stand up for what you think is right for your community. And I'm very, very pleased that you've done that. And I'm very grateful for you doing so. I think that you are here thinking that you are standing up for a principle of fairness, but I think on that I disagree. I think you are here essentially defending what is a accidental and unjustified exemption where people in Nunhead are treated differently to people across the rest of the borough. And I want to talk about why I don't think that's right. So we have our objectives for Streets for People, which I welcome the fact that you've said that we all agree on those things. You identified right there at the end, improving air quality, having greater green spaces, and reducing car ownership. And I think this is a little bit like how sometimes when we have a debate about taxing and public services, a lot of people will say that they want greater public services, greater spending on public services, but they do not want higher taxation. Those two things, I'm afraid, go together. And if you want to redistribute space on our streets from cars towards all the other things that we enjoy, be that parklets, be that trees, be that space for the local economy to thrive, then there needs to be a way of rationing that space. And at the moment, we have a free-for-all on some of our streets, and a free-for-all where, frankly, pedestrians and cyclists simply cannot compete against the large metal boxes they're put against. No one is taking away your cars. No one is stopping you driving. No one is saying you can't park your car on the public highway. Those things will all be possible. All we are saying is that some of that street space should be used for other things, the things that you yourself say you value, and that those of you who want to continue to park your property on public space will make a very small payment to do so. Now, I appreciate that that payment can be difficult, and the council is doing a huge amount of work on the cost of living crisis led by Councillor Cryan. But nonetheless, we currently have a situation where the majority of people in this borough who do not own a car subsidise those who do. And not only that, because of the unequal and unjust distribution of permit systems across the borough, it's only a small minority, and frankly, very often the most affluent sections of our borough that are able to park for free, where the other residents elsewhere have to pay for that exact same service. And I don't think that's fair. And there would maybe be a case of saying, okay, we need to look at this on a case-by-case basis. But I think you kind of betrayed the argument against that yourself, where you pointed out that Nunhead has some of the best air quality and some of the highest car ownership. So what that means, the people in Nunhead enjoy high quality air, largely because of the low population density there, but they are particularly likely to own the objects that create the poor air quality elsewhere in the borough. 50% of air pollution is caused by cars, and the only way we can deal with that is by driving down car ownership. I've heard in the past people say that the council is dishonest about what we're setting out to do. Streets for People is very clear. We're committed to driving down car use, driving down car ownership, and redistributing the space that is currently given a monopoly to cars to other uses, the economy, community, nature, and safe and active travel. Thank you very much for your
I'd like to thank the deputation for attending this evening. Officers will escort the deputation to the public area if you wish to listen to the debate. Thank you very much for coming this evening. Can officers please bring forward the third deputation, Sonia Okstali? Would the deputation spokesperson please address the meeting? You have 4 minutes to speak.
Good evening, and thank you for accepting our deputation on accessibility for the community and community organisations to Mint Street Community Centre. Mint Street historically has been the thriving heart of the community, with various groups using it to deliver vital services across the board. The stark reality is that since the Section 106 funding refurbishment, it has seen a drastic decline in those community groups having access to it. And we have recently discovered that it can only be used by the youth and play team at peak times, despite more space available. And if no staff are available after hours, it cannot be used. Southwark's policies across all areas have equalities for all running through the heart of them, as we have heard over and over again tonight. But is this the reality on the ground for us? And how does that work in principle? Mint Street was, as you will all be aware, funded following a planning meeting on the 24th of May 2017 with an agreed amount of just over £231,000 from Section 106 funding. Is it not also stated in that very same document, point 14, key issues for consideration were, this project will support the council's commitment to meet the needs of Southwark's diverse community. Point 15, proposed improvements will provide a high quality space indoors for a community centre which promotes interaction. Point 16, accessible to all without prejudice and discrimination. And finally, point 17, no impact on any particular protected characteristics. And for the interest of this deputation, we will focus on disability. Our experience has been contrary to all of these above statements. But please not let us limit ourselves to the underestimating the levels of unsupportive responses we have had in our endeavour from various departments within Southwark Council thus far: SEND, SIAS, Parks, Youth and Play Teams, Properties. From the challenging hiring processes and soaring expenses, this has transformed these spaces from being a hubs where hearts connected to barriers that keep us apart. Public funding belongs to the people and should ultimately benefit them. Unfortunately, these funds are not working as intended when it comes to hiring Mint Street. This space is just not available to rent, and rather than this being said so, a charade has ensued for us to finally understand this is the position of Southwark Council, all but in words. It is paramount that we do not ignore the positive aspects of the rebuild. The park area and building provides safe space and leisure activities for some children and young people. However, we are here to represent children, young people and their families from marginalised groups. I am here to discuss with you those children with neurodiverse needs. Thank you, Jasmine Ali. I have worked in education for over 15 years. I was on senior leadership teams and I am a qualified special educational needs coordinator. And I, Councillor Jasmine Ali, do have a thorough knowledge of the understanding of these needs, schools, statutory requirements and the local offer. I am also a mother to a 12-year-old daughter who was diagnosed in January 2023 with autism via Sunshine House. There are not one single youth club for children with autism or ADHD in the ward that we live in. They cannot access the current offer and the manager of the youth and play confirmed they cannot cater to children with higher needs. Given my skills, this was a service I knew I could provide. And along with my wonderful partners, Maureen and Toby, who also both felt the same, and also both long-standing Banksides residents, we created the Diversity Family Hub to provide the services to support children and young people and their families. That should be a part of the local offer, but is not. But we cannot. We cannot rent the space that we know would best fit and serve our users, highlighted in surveys that we have created. My limited time speaking thankfully means that I will not bore you with the tedious 2 months of trying to book this space, but rest assured no stone has been left unturned.
Thank you.
There is a huge gap in services for neurodiverse children, as we have repeatedly heard tonight. Please help us provide these services, thus ensuring points 14 to 17 are in fact true statements and therefore agreed for the release of the funding. We cannot communicate with anyone who will look at our plan strategically and work out a reasonable plan.
Thank you.
Finally,
thank you. Sorry.
and the inadequacy of support among many areas, I hope I do not need to reinforce the importance of making the use of what we already have in our borough. Thank you.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. Well, I'm pleased to say that you do have an opportunity to ask the leader of the relevant cabinet member question. Do you have a question?
We do, thank you. Given the crossover of issues here that arise in this deputation from wellbeing and health, which we've heard lots about, children and young people, parks, youth and play, equality, and I think this is part of the problem. Our question is, will you commit to meeting with us to establish easier, fairer and more equitable access to this and perhaps other such spaces for the good of the community as they were intended?
Can a cabinet member respond?
Yeah, I'm very happy to respond. I'm very happy to respond as the lead member for neighbourhoods, parks and leisure. I think there was a number of layers to the deputation and the issues. I think the basic one is the functionality of access to booking, the internal space and the external space. That's a very sort of functional aspect of the issues, but you talk about a much broader context about provision and access. And for the first time, play, youth service, leisure facilities, parks and green spaces are all under one portfolio, which is mine. So the short answer to your question is yes, of course, we will sit down and meet with you. And I think the points you raise about local offer, local provision, and then the strategic role that that facility plays in terms of supervised specific play, indoors and outdoors, for a whole range of children's needs in the borough has to be balanced with what the local community and the neighbourhood are saying they would like to see and have access to. So I look forward to arranging that meeting and speaking to you about it.
I'd like to thank the deputation for attending this evening. Officers will escort the deputation to the public sitting area if you wish to listen to the debate. Thank you. We are now moving on to the next part of the agenda, which is members' question time. We will now consider a late question from Councillor Chamberlain. Do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr. Mayor. And I thank the leader for the response. Just to clarify, I've just checked, the parliamentary record has recorded the senior officer as saying there are only 3,200 that we can fund. The leader's response says that the senior officer's the leader's response and the senior officer's evidence are incompatible. Will the leader correct the record, or will the council write to the select committee to record the evidence provided?
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain, for your question, which is about the number of council homes that we're building in the borough. I just want to very briefly do something before I answer your question, which is just to welcome Yusuf. It's fantastic to have a new councillor here. It's not always the most immediately rewarded job in terms of thanks being a councillor. Sometimes it is, but it is a job through which you can change people's lives every day. And so I hope you will really get stuck in enjoying that, as councillors across the chamber already do. So welcome and congratulations. So I'm sorry, back to the Leader of the Opposition's question. So I am delighted to say that in Southwark, we are building council homes at scale. We have now 3,200 homes that we've finished or on the site building today, the biggest programme in the country, and I'm very proud to be there. And we had the fantastic news just recently that when compared to the national data across the country, a third of council homes started last year were ours in Southwark. It's a remarkable achievement. But your question came to how we fund carrying on those homes, and it's a very good question. As I think members around the chamber will know, when we started out on our mission to build 11,000 homes, we did not have the money in the bank. We did not have several billion pounds sitting there waiting to be spent. But we have consistently found a way, and we have worked very hard to do that. We have worked to look at how we finance them locally, and we have very successfully worked to secure both more powers for us to raise money locally and more money from government, working with the Mayor of London. And so where we are today, we have a set of homes that are currently fully funded, those that are already being built, and we are actively working on how we finance the future rounds of those homes. And I'm very confident we'll be coming forward with proposals to do that, as we have done consistently over recent years.
Councillor Chamberlain, do you have a second supplementary question?
Respect, Leader, you haven't actually answered the question and you haven't clarified whether or not you're going to clarify the record about whether or not the evidence that was provided by the officer was correct. I'll move on. I do think that, you know, you might want to apologise for misleading residents and perhaps change the hoardings that are splattered across the borough, peddling this false lie. But the question I've got is, given today the government have announced that they were unable to spend £1.9 billion allocated to tackle the housing crisis, will you join me in writing to the Housing Secretary to ask for Southwark's fair share so that we can get on with building the council housing that we both desperately want?
Well, it's refreshing to hear the Leader of the Opposition actually point out the failures of the government. It's, I mean, there are a lot of them, so it should be quite an easy thing to do, and thank you for doing it. But I mean, it is an absolute scandal there. I don't know if people saw, but Michael Gove, Secretary of State for Levelling Up and Communities, has handed back £1.9 billion to the Treasury due to spend on solving the housing crisis, delivering more affordable homes, because he couldn't find projects to spend it on. An absolute scandal. Frankly, we probably couldn't spend it all in Southwark on our own, not in the short term, but in London, certainly we could spend all of that. We have projects, we have set them out for him. We've set them out for him and his department recently to say how we can do that, and we will continue to do so. It is absolutely, the housing crisis that we face in our country is getting worse and worse. We are now at a point where 1 in 23 children in London are in temporary accommodation. That number's shot up. That's a child in every classroom. It's an absolute scandal. And we have a government that's not only handing back money to the Treasury, they're getting rid of housing delivery targets. They are just in chaos with no plan. In Southwark, we have our plan, we have our commitment, we've set our vision for the long term, and we will keep working towards it. You're going to ask me, am I going to answer your question? And the short answer is, I will absolutely raise this direct with the government. I'm sure you'll want to do it on your own yourself, but we are different political parties. We will work separately on some of these things.
We shall now consider members' questions. We shall now consider members' question. As per the program motion, we only have 30 minutes for questions. So members should ensure that their supplementary questions are genuine questions rather than speeches. I'll now call Councillor Victor Chamberlain. Do you have a supplemental question?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday, Southwark News highlighted the case of an 88-year-old woman in Peckham who had a leak for roughly 2 years, and the council has done nothing about it. Is the council preparing itself for yet another housing ombudsman investigation? And if the council really has learnt lessons from these maladministration cases, how can this still be the situation when we're seeing so many of these instances across Southwark?
Councillor.
Thank you for the question. I don't know the details of that case in detail, but I will certainly look into them. And I think the really important thing to say here is I expect high standards from our housing service. And I absolutely recognise there have been cases where the service has got it wrong, and the Ombudsman has pointed that out to us very firmly. We have set out in detail how we have changed things in response to the Ombudsman's recommendations. And for example, we have now finished 1,900 visits to homes to proactively look at making sure we're finding the homes where there are damp problems. This is a challenge that all housing associations and councils face. I say that as no excuse. I say it is a national issue with making sure that social housing is up to a good standard. It is driven partly by the fact that funding for council housing has been driven down, and that councils have seen successive reductions in their ability to have rent income to pay for their homes. But that does not in any way take away the requirement for us to make sure people's homes are in good condition. I'm delighted that Councillor Merrill has been working incredibly hard with the department to set out improvements to our repairs service. And we have done a fundamental change in how complaints are handled within the department that I asked for personally following some of the cases that I'd seen and been raised with me. So change is definitely being made, but I will look in detail with Councillor Merrill into the case that you've raised as well.
Councillor Emily Exin, do you have a supplemental question?
I do. Thank you for your answer and your comments just then. I'm under no illusion what your message would be to Michael Gove, but could you tell us what lessons you think the government could learn from Southwark's house building successes?
Thank you for the question. Interestingly, I was asked this question by the DLEC Permanent Secretary last week. How has Southwark got to a point where we're building council housing at scale? And I think the short answer is we set ourselves a really big target that was in the future, and we said we're really going to go for it. If we'd said, as many councils around the country have, you know, we're just going to commit to build the next 100 homes we can do, or the next 500 homes we can do, and then we'll see what we can get to, we wouldn't have built up a fantastic Southwark construction scheme. We wouldn't have developed a pipeline of sites across the borough. We wouldn't have got to a place where we are building, we've got a fantastic quality home standard for our council housing, all of those fundamental blocks. And we wouldn't have been in a place where we were able to shift the national debate and be one of those councils that were up there allowing changes to council house funding, grant conditions. I'm delighted to say that, you know, we have recently been one of the councils fundamentally getting making sure that there are short term for the moment, hopefully long term for the future change, so that all right to buy receipts stay local to reinvest. We made that case and we helped win it with others, but we've only been able to do that because we set a long-term vision, a big target into the future, a mission that we've been delivering on.
Councillor David Watson, do you have a supplemental question?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank the leader for his response. It was interesting to learn from this evening's business that Southwark also contracts its pest control services to Croydon. And on closer inspection, Croydon Council offers those very same services to residents for significantly cheaper, £33 for rats in the home and £80 for rats outside. So my question is, why can Southwark not do the same when they're providing the same service directly? Do I smell a rat?
Thank you for your question, and I want to come back to the original question as well in this. So you originally asked why Southwark has such high numbers of treatments for rats, and the short answer for that is set out on paper, is that we offer a service for all residents. And so whilst in Lib Dem control Sutton and Richmond, and indeed in Kingston, there is no pest control service from the council for people in private homes, private owned or rented. In Southwark, we provide that service for all of our residents. We have set out our prices to be fair and transparent for our council tenants. It's a free service. For tenants on low incomes, it's a half price service. For those who can afford to pay, we do ask them to pay. I would love to make all of those things cheaper, but of course that comes back to the realities of being in a situation where the government has taken 2/3 of our funding out, as I so often sadly have to say, over the course of a decade and more, and we have to make some hard choices. But it's when we benchmarked across councils across the city, our offer is a good one, and fundamentally we offer it to people that Liberal Democrat councils don't even bother to serve.
Councillor Sonny Lambert, do you have a supplemental question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do. First of all, I want to congratulate you on your election. Congratulations. Now, I want to thank the leader for your comprehensive answer to my initial question. Now, this is my supplemental question. How can residents access the support outlined in the written answer to my question?
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. So this is the support that we're offering through the cost of living crisis for all of our residents. And I want to say a huge thank you both to Councillor Cryan, but also to our coalition of voluntary sector organisations, NHS, and many others who've come together to make sure that support gets to those who need it. The first thing to say is much of the support, we are making sure it goes to people automatically. We're just in the process of giving out another cost of living payment, prioritised for households on low income, those in council tax bands A to C. That is automatically going out to people. They don't need to ask. We're putting it straight into their pockets with 55,000, I think it is, payments already out of the door in just a few days. However, there's additional support for those who need it most. And our Southwark Emergency Service Support Service is there for people to access it. And so is, I'm very pleased to say, a network of, I think now over 80 community referral partners across the borough. That's local charities, some you'll recognise, like Time and Talents and Pecan and Pembroke House. It's NHS partners, it's schools, and it's many more. So I would encourage people to, if they don't know where to go, come to the Council Southwark Emergency Support Service and ask the question, or indeed, if there's a local charity in their community that they already work with, ask them, because they'll probably be able to make a direct referral for you.
Councillor Rachel Bentley, do you have a supplemental question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for your response this evening, and thank you to Councillor Merrill for his response to the deputation, which I'm sure the residents of the Kirby estate have appreciated. But there was a glaring omission in the response, and that was about restoring trust. And I think if there has been one theme this evening, it is that there is a loss of trust from residents in the responses from the council. So I just want to confirm that indeed you will commit to restoring trust. There has been months and months and months that the residents independently have tried to get responses on these issues, and they have fallen on deaf ears. And it was only by getting this deputation here tonight that they've been able to get a response. So will you commit to restoring trust?
The important thing here, and Councillor Merrill has obviously said some of this already, but we absolutely are fully investigating what has happened to your windows. And so that's the fencer investigation, and that's building control, and that's the important thing. Our commitment is that as soon as we have those reports, we will share them with residents so you can see direct what they said, see with your own eyes that you're happy with them, and we will set out the work that's needed in response to them based on their recommendations, so you can see that too. And I hope that absolutely is the thing that allows you to have trust in the work that the council is doing on your behalf to make sure your homes are in good condition.
Councillor Renata Amvas, do you have a supplemental question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to the leader for his response. And it's a very comprehensive response. Thank you for that. And it just shows, it looks like a win-win situation for both the council and residents. And following on from that, I was just wondering what early feedback have we received about the new service, the new in-house service from residents? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So we have last month brought our leisure services back in-house. Huge thank you to both Councillor Rose for an incredible amount of work on this, actually, but to all of the staff across the team. It's no small feat at all bringing in-house so many leisure centres: Camberwell, Peckham, the Castle, Dulwich, and so on. And we've had a really positive response from the staff themselves who've transferred across to us, from everyone active, and we've had a really positive response from our customers too. It's fair to say there've been some glitches. We found some things that the contractor had perhaps not been doing properly in the last few weeks or months of them having the contract, that we've had to rectify. And we're working very hard to do that. But we will be working long term to make sure our leisure centres and services are ones that improve health and well-being and reduce inequalities across our borough. And I was particularly delighted to go around and visit the new Canada Water Leisure Centre, which is well on the way at the moment. Will be extremely exciting when we're able to open that. Feedback from residents, I say, has been really positive, but we are doing a thorough survey of residents to find out their views in detail, so we can make sure it's the right service for them, with the right classes, the right facilities, the right conditions, and the right way of running, and delivering public services in public ownership is something I'm very proud that we're doing on such scale.
Councillor John Batson, do you have a supplemental question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank the leader for his response to my question, which was around how the Windrush Fund has benefited local communities. The funding was to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Empire of Windrush's arrival here in the UK, and the contribution that generation made to our communities here in Southwark. So how do we make sure this isn't a one-off, and that we continue to support the Windrush generation in light of the ongoing hostilities they face from the current Conservative government?
Thank you, Councillor Batson. Well, it was fantastic to celebrate such an important moment in our country's history. In fact, we had it in here, and I want to absolutely congratulate Mr. Mayor for organising what was an amazing event here. with some brilliant speakers celebrating the huge contribution that the Windrush generation have contributed to our country, but also setting out some really awful, dark, bleak times that people have come through, and the racism they experienced, but also in the hostility they've experienced from our own government. I think there's a short answer that we need a change. We have a current government where the minister thinks it's his job to go and ask for murals to be painted over of children's Disney characters because he doesn't want our country to be a welcoming place. But fundamentally, we need the change is not to have people like that running our country. It's a disgrace, and it makes me deeply ashamed of the tone that our country sets. In the meantime, we will set a different tone here in Southwark as we have. We've been working very hard to make sure there is support for people with the Windrush compensation scheme, and we will continue to put the pressure on the government to properly administer that scheme so people can get the support they're entitled to. We will continue to celebrate the diversity of our borough and people who've come from all around the world to make all kinds of contributions. And I'm delighted to say in the immediate term, we've also reopened our Windrush Fund. There's a current live application round again, and we're asking people across the community to give us their ideas on how we can do that celebration part in the autumn with a whole range of activities that will happen again from the autumn onwards.
Councillor Graham Neil, do you have a supplemental question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Can I take this opportunity to thank our council leader for referring to mental health support that he received earlier this evening? Here and genuinely thank you for helping to remove the stigma around mental health. Let's get back to the politics. Question 9, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's important. Thank you, Kieran, genuinely thank you. Question 9, the right to protest, Thank you for your reply. I'm reminded of the 2006 Identity Card Act and the campaign that we had in Southwark to repeal it. Your response refers to the front benchers in Westminster, the Labour front benchers. I wonder, do you think that the Labour front benchers will be progressive and repeal the Act, or will they come on all authoritarian and strengthen it? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I mean, I think there's a fairly easy answer to that, which is the Labour front benchers have consistently voted against this act. So I think we can be really clear that they're against it and won't be carrying on with it in government. And it is just a clear example where if we want progressive policies in the country, if we want fairness, we need people running the country who believe in fairness and progressive values. And that's a change that is long, long overdue. And thank you for your thanks. It is mental health is something that we all need to talk about more. And I think it is incredibly important that we do, and it's not always easy for people to do so. And we all have a role where you feel comfortable to do so, to talk about it as people who have a voice, because we need to make that change. And it's just another aspect of health.
We now move to the questions to the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Children, Education and Refugees, Councillor Jasmine Ali. Councillor Irina Van Vis, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your answer, which was a question about the proposed amalgamation of St. Mary Magdalene School. And it struck me in your answer to question 3, an amazing statistic, which is that the birth rate across England and Wales has fallen by 14%, 17% in London, and a staggering 30% in Southwark over the same period of time. Now, it strikes me that unless there is some particularly innovative contraceptive methods which only the residents of Southwark have access to, could that possibly have something to do with the lack of affordable housing in Southwark? And if so, my question is, are we on target to build the 40,000 homes promised by 2036, which means 2,355 per year? And if so, how many of these homes will be for families?
And the deputy leader, please answer the question.
Okay, thank you for your supplemental, Councillor Onwys. Yes, we are broadly on target. I think really the other point in our council delivery plan, but I did want to say that you know, with the birth rate and you know the movement out of London, we did say in my Keeping Education Strong strategy that there are a number of reasons for this demographic shock that we find ourselves in, and you know, and like what you're saying, and like what the leader of the opposition said in his Southwark column, is that you know that we were denying that house prices had anything to do with that. And actually, if you refer back to my Keeping Education Strong strategy, where we outline the reasons for this, the falling birth rate, which you've already said, Brexit phenomena, you know, and also house prices, you know, and the fact that 30% of our families have left, you know, have left the borough, you know, they all conspire to make, you know, the reason for that. So I hope that's answered your question, but happy to. The other thing that I wanted to say is thank you for your questions as well. I did promise last time I gave a webinar that I would come back to you, and if it's not in the diary already, I'm happy to come back and speak to you about, you know, how we're mapping the trends and how we're working on the delivering the Keeping Education Strong strategy. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Natasha Ennin, do you have a supplemental question? Okay, she's not present. Councillor Margie Newens, do you have a supplemental questions?
I do, thank you very much. And thank you for your response, Councillor Ali. And I'm sure that every member in this proceedings this evening can be proud of the way in which Southwark is welcoming refugees. And I'm sure that we also will share, discussed particularly this week, the government's response to people in very, very severe need. The Tories want to stop refugees from coming to this country. How do we make people fleeing war welcome in Southwark?
Thank you for your supplemental, Councillor Newens. Okay, well, the Tories do want to stop migrants coming from this country, and it's obvious, but we do have a proud record in Southwark of welcoming our brothers and sisters seeking asylum, seeking refugee status, and you know that is evident. Do you know that we have the second highest population of asylum seekers and refugees in London? So we are doing something right here. We've supported refugees on programmes, which you all know about, which is a Syrian programme, Afghanistan programme, and more recently Ukraine. And our no recourse to public funds team is currently supporting 800 adults and 350 children. We support unaccompanied asylum seeking children, many who are placed with experienced foster carers, unlike what the government want to do. And we saw the shameful way that they placed a 9-year-old in a hotel in Sussex. Okay, we work closely with the voluntary sector and community Southwark. We fund Southwark Day Centre for Asylum Seekers, the local law centre, and we support Citizens Advice. We fund regular refugee celebration events like the one that I went to last week, and our MPs are always on hand to help with immigration questions and casework. On a practical level, we are assessing all welfare needs, providing ESOL lessons, school places, driving lessons, you know, the list is endless really. And I did want to make a plug, because you may not have seen this and in the spirit of tonight's thematic debate, Evelyn's public health team have produced a joint needs assessment for asylum seekers and refugees. I had a copy somewhere to wave around, but it's advocating for our residents, improving access to health services, building on the strength of the voluntary sector, and making data work for the benefit of asylum seekers and refugees. I work closely with my counterpart in Lambeth, because it's quite convenient. We have the similar issues. And, you know, I'm sick of writing to this government about their harebrained schemes. You know, even when they want to do something good, you know, which is like giving people leave to remain, they can't even get that right. You know, they place so many people in the hotels and they say, actually, we're going to give you all leave to remain, but you've only got 25 days to apply for it. Obviously, we have some brilliant staff in Southwark, but I myself have been going to hotels on language line to make sure that people don't miss that window of opportunity leave to remain. Now, the Borough of Sanctuary, a lot of you will think, why aren't you just getting on with it? But actually, there's a lot of threads through, when we came and we said we're Borough of Sanctuary, I thought that would be it. But actually, it's very thorough. And I'm telling you that we could go for it tomorrow and get it. We want to get Borough of Sanctuary in true Southwark styling. Basically, we are so welcoming. And so, all of the things that I talked about, I'm working with the voluntary sector now to pull all of these threads together so we can do even better, because there's so much going on in Southwark. But the Borough of Sanctuary will pull it all together, map it, and and I also personally wanted to thank all the councillors in the room for all that you do too. So thank you. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Councillor Portia Wungranje, do you have a supplemental question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Jasmine Ali, you're doing a lot of great work for young people's mental health, especially in schools. And my supplementary question was actually on schools. Can you tell us more about the support for children in schools when it comes to mental health, alongside everything that you guys are doing amazingly in the Nest?
Very much for supplemental, Councillor Manganji, and thank you. So I wanted to say congratulations on your deputy cabinet role, looking after and supporting our young people. And I'm very excited to see, what comes out of that, and look forward to working with you on that too. Yes, we have a special programme to promote a whole schools approach. Obviously the very basics, it's all right, it's okay not to be okay. We have been improving mental health and resilience in schools. You'll remember that we invested 2 million into schools prevention at the same time that we were thinking about opening up the Nest. And that 2 million has gone far. We've also got the DFB have contributed 180k. We've got funding from what was the CCG, the original formation, and the GLA. So, we've been at it, and there's so much to speak about, but the interests of brevity, school successes to date, we've got good stakeholder engagements and partnerships. We've got physical and digital self-help resources, pupil leadership. You'll be glad to know that the voice of the child and young people are at the lead of this. Staff development and learning, training, qualifications, the youth parliament that now comes under you, they wanted to make that priority, and they have done brilliantly in our schools. We've got local innovation projects. So, that funding wasn't a one size fit all. It was basically allowing schools and individual schools to bid for funding and come up with some innovative ideas. Resilience and support and targeted programs is so important, really, because there's so much support. But this idea that you can have resilience coaches in the schools, pupils can have that. That's pretty amazing, and it actually works. Curriculum and teaching, learning resources, accreditation for this as well. We've got a 2-day mental health training that's so far covered over 500 mental health first aiders in school. We've covered over 100 schools. And in addition to all of this, as you mentioned, the Nest. That has been truly amazing, because it's not just a drop-in, but they have been going into schools. And I see David Kirk-Thornton, our strategic director in the audience. We have made sure that schools are very, very supported. And, I want to thank his team for all the work that they have done on this as well. I've already said, that we really are in a crisis of mental health. And, after the pandemic, we have seen that the reset in education isn't what it should be. And, we are absolutely doing all that we can. And we also want our partners in health as well, to get the clinical support. Well, I'll get the waiting list now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very keen on getting more supplemental questions in, so I would ask for briefer questions and briefer answers. Can I call on Councillor Maggie Browning to ask any supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I thank the cabinet member for her answer, and I'm delighted that we will be doing a pilot and offering free school meal support to families in receipt of universal credit. And I can see Southwark is leading yet again in London and in the country on our provision of free school meals to all families and children who need it. My question is, how can we make sure that the free school meals are healthy that we provide in Southwark for our children?
Thank you. I have got a long answer, but I'll make it short and snappy. I think thank you very much for your supplemental, and thank you so much for all you do in your NEU capacity for, you know, the free school meals campaign. Thank you so much for that. What are we doing to make our free healthy school meals healthy? Well, I have to say that I remember that Evelyn and some of the staff came, some of her team came from public health, and they said that they wanted to make our free school meals healthy. And I had this terrible vision, because, you know, I'm a bit of a philistine only sometimes, of, you know, getting, and I'm glad Kevin's gone now because I think he was there as well. He came through the door and I just imagined him with a clipboard in a white coat going to the schools, you know, trying to make the offer healthy. And I said, you know, all you've got to do is ask the children and the teachers what they want. And do you know what they did? They basically have got this massive program which has worked. They're getting children to grow, not all the food, obviously, that would be a bit utopian, but to grow food, have a healthy relationship, you know, with the food. So they're growing food, tasting food, reduction in crisps and unhealthy food. And, you know, it's absolutely working. And am I doing that with a free school meals offer in secondaries? Absolutely. If they want to get that grant funding, and they do, we are actually going in with our white coats and clipboards, auditing their kitchens. So, you know, we've got this body of evidence to show that we can make the free healthy school meals healthy. And, you know, I'm very proud of that. I'm sorry, my answer's a bit long.
Councillor Jason Achere, do you have a supplemental question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was in regards to fallen school roles, and I think it's worth probably noting that the strategy that we put in place in order to mitigate fallen school roles is quite an important one, and should put on the record that there was a real and living threat of us not doing anything, and the fact that we have a strategy in place means that we're able to mitigate that risk. But my question is, what does the fallen school roles mean for children with special and additional needs in our borough? Are you able to shed some light on that?
Well, thank you so much for your supplemental, and thank you so much for all that you have done on your scrutiny committee to make sure that we get the Keeping Education Strong strategy right. In answer to your question, what does that mean for children with special and additional needs? Without exception, the priority for Southwark school leaders has been to protect education for the most vulnerable children, including those with special education needs. You know, we have a strategy, you know, to make sure that we do right by our children with special education needs. I've already announced tonight, you know, that we have done some brilliant work with mental health needs, and now we are like really going to make, you know, we're going to make Southwark the exemplar when it comes to supporting special education needs, and none of our children will be disrupted, you know, through the Keeping Education Strong programme. So, you know, that I wanted to reassure you of that. And I think, you know, watch this space, but I wanted to assure, you know, obviously we had questions from the opposition that, you know, we have got the maximum support for all our children, including those with special needs. If a school closes, you know, that they will be held, they will be supported, their families will be supported, and we have got everyone in it to make sure that their transition, even with, you know, the amalgamations, that people can move together, move with their friends and move with support. So, you know, there's absolute handover. Thank you.
Thank you. We've now reached the end of members' question time. We are now moving to the members' motion part of the agenda. Motion 1, which relates to support the Ash Lift the Ban campaign. Councillor Naima Ali to move motion 1. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, allow me to take this opportunity to send my love, thoughts and prayers to our colleague Maria Linford Hall, whose husband is in in his deathbed. My heart goes out to her and her family. And thank you to all NHS staff for their amazing work. Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to move this motion, Leave the Ban campaign. Before I start, I want you to think for a second and applaud this person who stands in front of you, who was once an asylum seeker and now is a councillor and a deputy mayor in Southwark. My journey was different. My journey was different, but challenging and rewarding too. Comrades, beyond the European Union, Canada and Australia allows asylum seekers to work immediately. In the USA, they're eligible to work after 6 months. In the UK, an asylum seeker can apply to work after 12 months and can only work in jobs on the shortage occupation list to ensure that they do not take jobs for which a domestic worker could be found. Friends, according to the British Red Cross, in 2021, 12,727 people were referred to authorities as potential victims of modern slavery or exploitation. And imagine 58% are exploited in the UK, forced to work to earn survival. These are people who haven't ability to advocate for themselves. Comrades, how many of them are suffering in silence? Today in Southwark, there are 1,002 people seeking asylum in receipt of Section 98 support and 1,273 people in receipt of Section 95 support. Can you imagine living on £5.39 per day? Yes, indeed, it is happening. This is happening now to our asylum seekers in Southwark. Comrades, giving asylum seekers right to work will strengthen their chances to be able to integrate, allow them to live in dignity and to provide for themselves and their family. Give them the opportunity to use their skills, help to challenge forced labor, exploitation, and modern slavery. It will result in an economic gain of £97.8 million per year for the UK government as a result of additional tax revenue and savings. They will gain skills that will benefit them back in their country in case of their successful asylum claim. Comrades, let me share with you a story of Amina, whom I can relate to. Amina came to UK in 1997 as an asylum seeker from Somalia. I guess you remember year 1997, when the whole country united mourning the death of Princess Diana and Labour Party came into power. 6 months after, Amina was granted right to work while waiting for asylum decision. Within days, she started working in a hotel as a chambermaid, cleaning 20 rooms a day, but she was earning £3 per hour, not £5 per day. Amina was happy. She was a taxpayer and did not depended on handout or social welfare. She was able to integrate, send money to her family. She was independent. She wasn't at risk of exploitation. She learned a lot from diverse community and more of the British values. 4 years later, she was granted leave to remain in the UK. Could you imagine if you could have wasted 4 years of her life in the UK? Comrade, Amina's initial positive experience in the UK as an asylum seeker was one of the contributing factors of her hopes, self-worth, self-determination, and achievement. And today, she's one of nurses who has worked tirelessly when the nation needed her most. And that is the story I can relate to. Allowing asylum seekers' right to work is just a common sense. In summary, giving asylum seekers the right to work will help them gain financial autonomy that enables them to support themselves and their family, not wasting their talent, promote integration, and actively contribute to the development and economy of our country. Comrades, let's join the Live Coalition and call on to UK government to change the migration rules so people seeking asylum can work from 6 months after they have submitted their claim. Permission to work should extend to sectors beyond the shortage occupational list and allow self-employment too. Please join me to support the motion. Thank you.
I'll now call on Councillor Irina Van Vees to second motion 1. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much, Councillor Ali, for your kind words for Councillor before. Mr. Mayor, as a Liberal Democrat, as a human rights lawyer and refugee rights activist, and as the daughter and granddaughter of refugees, I am pleased to second this cross-party motion. Allow me to tell you briefly the story of Hayat, a young Ethiopian woman who I hosted for nearly 3 years. She was trafficked to the UK and after years of abuse escaped to the streets of London. Homeless and without papers, she ended up at a crisis shelter in Shoreditch, where the organization Refugees at Home found her and referred her to me. After weeks of getting to know each other and a lot of help from Google Translate, I pieced together her story. An outspoken member of the Oromo ethnic group, she had been beaten by police in Ethiopia and her husband arrested. That's why she decided to go to Saudi Arabia and work as a domestic help. In reality, she was kept as a slave. The Saudi family moved to Britain and took her along with false papers. Too scared to go back to Ethiopia, she eventually applied for asylum. But because of her falsified documents, the Home Office did not believe her identity. After 19 months, her claim was rejected and she appealed, this time on grounds of human trafficking. It also turned out that she was a highly skilled tailor and back in Ethiopia used to have her own business and train other women. But under UK law, she was not allowed to work. For 2.5 years, while her asylum claim and appeal were pending, she volunteered every day at a local refugee center, learned English and was offered a job at a local dry cleaner, but was not allowed to take it. Instead, she had to rely on me providing her with food and shelter and on government handouts. I could not even allow her to help with cleaning or cooking because that would have been regarded as work. She told me she felt useless and humiliated. Work is dignity. As Liberal Democrats, we believe that freedom includes the right to decent employment, the right to be your own employer and employ others, and to be recognized and compensated for what you contribute to society. Hayat contributed a lot to her new community. She taught me to look at the world through different eyes. She taught my daughter not to take freedom and safety for granted. She cooked meals for hundreds of people at the local neighborhood center. She could have done so much more. Instead, she was forced to rely on handouts and charity. The Home Office says asylum claims will usually be decided within 6 months. In reality, FOI requests found that on average, it takes 1 to 3 years to get an initial decision on an asylum case. Some cases take longer than 5 years. This does not include the time asylum seekers must wait before making an initial application or the appeals process, which makes wait times much longer. In 2022, there were 125,300 work in progress cases. With 75% of cases ending in grounds of protection, this means vulnerable people are being made to wait years in limbo and without the right to work before they can even begin the next chapter of their lives. Estimates suggest that preventing asylum seekers from working costs the taxpayer more than 300 million. Mr. Mayor, the Live the Ban campaign is not new. A 260-member strong coalition of charities, trade unions, businesses, and faith groups have been campaigning since 2018 to overturn the government's ban on asylum seekers being able to work.
Please do conclude.
Last year, 81% of the public support the right to work. So do the people of Southwark. Let's send the government a clear message. This is nonsensical and harmful ban.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll now call on Councillor Jasmine Ali to speak on the motion.
All right, thank you. I promise I'll make it snappy. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And I wish to thank Councillor Ali and Councillor Von Wees for bringing the motion to reinstate the right to work for our brothers and sisters seeking asylum. What would Southwark be without migration? Without the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Normans, without the Huguenots, the Chinese, the Jews, without guests who came at government's invitation from the Caribbean, the African Commonwealth, from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, without more recent friends and neighbours fleeing persecution in Vietnam, in Yemen, in Syria, Sudan, Afghanistan, and of course the Ukraine. Almost everyone in Southwark, everyone in London, and yes, everyone in the United Kingdom hails from a family that came here from beyond our island shores. Yes, even the King, even the Prime Minister, and even, dare I mention her name, the Home Secretary. Indeed. While we're talking about her, how dare she talk about illegal asylum seekers? It's not illegal to come here and seek asylum, and she's in no position to accuse other people of breaking the law. How many laws has the Home Office broken under her misleadership? Scarcely a day goes by without a court deciding that she and her rogue department have broken the law of the land, housing asylum seekers in unlawful conditions, deporting people illegally, placing unaccompanied children in hotels, and even her whole rotten Rwanda policy has been found to break international and domestic law. She is a lawbreaker, not law-abiding migrant families. Here in Southwark, I am pleased to say that Southwark has a proud tradition of supporting our brothers and sisters fleeing war-wracked countries. Over the last year, my team, led by Stephen Douglas, have run specialist services which provide direct support for 1,500 individuals and 500 children. I have no recourse for public funds, I've already said, and this was an 89% increase in the number of households supporting during the year before, an 89% increase. So why can we do this? Because our council is not fighting a pointless diversionary cultural war. It is not trying to victimise and dehumanize people, to directly blame them against scapegoats. We are trying to help people. We are working hard to provide support. We can, but we are being hobbled by this Tory government. You cannot integrate if you are not allowed to work. If asylum seekers can work while they wait for their decision, it will make their resettlement a greater success. Break their reliance on the state, help them to contribute to our local economy, and let them take their place in our local communities. Please support the motion. Let's campaign until the right to work is reinstated and this inequity is consigned to the history books.
I call on Councillor Portia Muganje to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 15 minutes. I will make this quick. I would just like to thank everybody in this room for supporting a motion. All of us are coming together on something that's really, really important. So thank you so much. My contribution to this is, I came here in the year 2000, me and my mother. We moved here as refugees, asylum seekers. The thing is, we're talking about work, and my mum is disabled, and she wasn't able to do the horrendous work that refugees are forced to work in. And because of that, she had to rely on handouts. We had to go to charity shops to get clothes. And I would actually like to say that I know my mum's story play by play, but she can't relay that information because of all of the trauma that she's lived. So as a child, I really don't remember half of the stuff because my mum shielded me from all of the conditions that we had to live in, the temporary housing accommodation, her having to live on the schemes that the government had at the time to support her. But because of that, she's unable to explain to me, because of her trauma, of everything that she has been through. So I stand here today as a daughter of a survivor and a refugee of these conditions, having a law degree, having a master's degree in global business, studying and working in New York, working for the UN in Geneva, and also being a local councillor here in Southwark. These are the people that we can support. I am the person, I am the reflection of what refugees and asylum seekers are able to achieve if we are just given the chance. And I will end by saying this. Thank you. I will end by saying this. There was a book that was recommended to me this week, and it actually genuinely sums up what this ban is all about. And it was a book written by Ian Sanjay Patel. It's called "We Are Here Because You Were There." Lift the ban and give us what we shouldn't have to ask for, which is our humanity. So thank you all for supporting this motion, because honestly, I can't explain to you what this actually means to every single one of us that have suffered. So thank you.
Councillor Nick Johnson, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I begin, may I congratulate you on what's a triumphant first council assembly. It's surprisingly intimate, which actually, I like more than I expected to. I will be brief, and I think my speech will be considerably less powerful than some of the speeches we have heard tonight. There are times that I despair of this country. Karen, you mentioned this earlier with Robert Jenrick. Bizarre painting over a Mickey Mouse mural. I mean, that is actively taking time and money to make things actively worse for no reason at all. It's not going to deter someone coming to this country. We seem to have a government of kleptocrats, bigots, and racist little Englanders. It's deeply shocking. I believe I'm not the only person in this chamber that is hoping for an extinction level event for the Conservative Party at the next general election. They deserve to be destroyed for a generation. They don't represent much of this country. They certainly don't represent London. And most of all, they don't represent the values that we hold dear in the borough of Southwark. We say it often, don't we? United to serve. And perhaps we say it so often because it's true. As a borough, our values are very different to those of Mr. Jenrick. We celebrate our diversity. We welcome people from all over the world, those fleeing persecution, those looking for a better life, and those who come just because Southwark is the best borough in London and they want to be a part of that. It's time that we make it crystal clear to the world that our values are different and better than those of Mr. Jenrick. And so I call on all of us to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Barry Hargrove to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and a particular thank you to the movers of this bipartisan motion and the very moving speeches we've heard so far. It comes as a surprise to me that this Lift the Ban campaign has been running since 2018, and I don't know how I missed it, but 14 pioneering MPs, the vast majority of whom, it has to be said, belong to the Socialist Campaign Group, brought an early day motion to Parliament in 2021. However, not surprisingly, this was voted down by the Conservative government. In response, the Parliamentary Secretary of State at the time essentially stated that to give asylum seekers the right to work was uneconomical. Putting to one side the absence of any consideration given to the welfare and needs of these unfortunate people, the circumstances now show that this assumption to be completely short-sighted. Today, in 2023, the economy of this country is declining. in no small part due to record job vacancies, something we've heard about earlier in the debate on the NHS and the social care workforce. Mr. Mayor, I'm proud of this council tonight for passing this motion in support of asylum seekers. However, I feel we'll have to wait for the removal of this deceitful government. Deceitful because them and their rabid right-wing press want to focus on the 45,000 people that make the life-threatening journey across the Channel, and not the 600,000 people that come here by other means. Not that I'm having a go at them either. It is a government that scapegoats refugees for votes. We've already heard earlier about the shameful antics of a Home Office minister ordering the removal of a children's mural. And we have a Home Secretary that dreams of deporting asylum seekers to Rwanda. And the Prime Minister, who every time he gets in trouble bleats, "Stop the boats." Let Southwark continue to be a beacon for asylum seekers. Let us appreciate what they have to give. Support the motion, get behind the campaign.
Thank you. We have now come to the end of members who wanted to speak on this motion. I'll now ask Councillor Naima Ali to reply. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you everyone for your contributions. I can honestly tell you that this is something so dear to me. And I just wanted to add on to when we say work shouldn't just be work. And they need to be treated with dignity by every man. So we have our residents down there right now, what they're suffering. They've got no papers, nothing, please. We've already supported the motion, but thank you so much for all your contributions. And this is the day that I will never, ever forget. Thank you.
I shall now move to the vote on motion 1. Those in favor of the substantive motion 1? That is a unanimous vote. The substantive motion is carried. We will now move to motion 2, clean up Southwark. Councillor Rachel Bentley to move motion 2. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Gosh, well, I should say that I'm afraid this is going to take a rather different tone from what we've just heard. So when I saw the amendments to our motion, my first reaction was one of amusement. Surely this was some kind of a joke. Are Labour Party councillor colleagues genuinely going to sit there with a straight face and vote for these amendments? Are we really boldly stating that Southwark has 4, yes, just 4 cameras that address fly tipping across our whole borough? I honestly thought you'd missed off a few digits, because trust me, tomorrow I could find you 40 spots in the north of the borough where fly tipping cameras could wash their own face if deployed correctly. But my favourite statistic was that over 98.6% of fly tipping reported was removed within 24 hours. Really? Really? Removed within 24 hours? But it was removed proactively before being reported. I mean, that's truly something quite remarkable. So you'd almost think there's no need for a Fix My Street app with that level of proactivity. But then I thought, oh gosh, it must be my mistake. It's the 4.1% of fly tipping that's not removed within 24 hours that must be in my ward, and it must be all that fly tipping that I'm dutifully reporting. So I'm a pretty trusting person, but I thought I'd do a test when I saw your amendments. So I went out on Monday evening and I reported a whole bunch of fly tipping. And I can confirm to you that as of Wednesday morning today, it's still very much there. And the beauty of the Fix My Street app is that it gives you a lot of data. Even the most superficial skims of Southwark data show you that fly tipping is an enormous problem. The approach, if there is one to address this, appears to be entirely reactive. Now, I do believe that you care about the environment, and I believe that you care about people and public health. We've heard that tonight. I also believe that you're proud of Southwark and your respective neighbourhoods, but you must accept that the statistics in your amendments are Orwellian. I mean, we even had an exotic South American owl come to help and eat the rat population that's booming in Bermondsey and Rotherhithe as a result of our out of control rubbish situation. It's almost like the owl heard the residents' pleas for help. Now, if you're serious about creating this streets for people strategy, you do need to focus on the dirt and the rubbish in our public spaces. As the strategy says, where there are pleasant green community spaces, people want to stay. I'd agree with that. So unless you're trying to make the case that all of our rubbish and fly tipping is some kind of street art, like our proliferating graffiti, or that skipping over dog dirt is somehow good for our health, then I'd suggest that there's a glaring omission to your aspirational vision for Southwark's future. Now, some people tease me for litter picking, along with my friend, Councillor Jane Salmon. Friends and family think it's a bit weird. I've even had people ask me about if I'm out on day release. But you see, the reason I do it is because it's one of the few things that actually makes me feel better about this world, this bleak world that we've heard so much of tonight. Like helping a resident in crisis, it's a tangible way to make an extremely bleak world feel just a little bit better. Now, I've been a councillor long enough now to know that you will vote your amendments through. And here in Southwark, we've come to understand that the Labour Party only tolerates certain types of bad behaviour. I would close by saying you cannot fix a problem if you do not accept that you have a problem. And with this matter, you have the operational power to resolve it. It is fully within your gift. So I urge you not to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. Do the right thing. Learn from other councils that are doing things so much better. Lambeth, right next door, issued the most fines for littering in the whole country. Newham, where they've cracked down on fly tippers and really made a difference. And yes, Lib Dem run counts, Kingston, which has won accolades for its technology-based approach. So start taking this issue seriously, sort out the ludicrous overflowing bins, take enforcement against litterers and fly tippers, and recognise that if you really want to create streets for people, then the best place to start would be keeping them clean and rubbish-free. Thank you.
Councillor David Watson to second motion 2. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So according to government figures, Southwark is the 7th most fly-tipped borough in London. Fly tipping has increased every year, with incidents now 56% higher than in 2018, costing almost £1 million to dispose of every year. Residents have to endure this blight on their neighbourhoods, which causes health, environmental hazards and pest problems. Streets appear dirty and run down, and citizens lose pride in their communities. Of course, fly tipping is a challenging problem to address, but the council is failing to deploy even its existing tools adequately. Just 2% of reported incidents last year led to fixed penalty notices. Last year, the council didn't issue a single litter fine. And by increasing the fees for bulky waste collection earlier this year, the council is just disincentivizing citizens from doing the right thing. From residents' perspectives, the council are simply not taking this seriously enough. Colleagues, we can do better. We can learn lessons from Kingston, from Sutton, from Richmond, who are at top in the league tables for the least fly-tipped boroughs. Yes, our neighbours in Lambeth are making progress, as are Newham, who've taken targeted action, as Councillor Bentley said, to reduce fly tipping by 64%. And as always, and certainly here, our residents are part of the team. I have constituents that regularly and diligently report fly tipping and rubbish hotspots. One even keeps a daily tally of the rubbish that's accumulating on Blackfriars Road. The latest incarnation of it is here. Another regularly reports fly tipping on Union and Weber Streets. But I'm sorry to say, Mr. Mayor, that they see little interest from the council in getting ahead of these problems or making strategic interventions. So we're proposing quite simply to increase the number of public bins, to remove the bulky waste collection charge altogether, to maintain the existing street cleaning rota, and to prioritise enforcement and actually fining fly tippers. More strategically, the council should set up a dedicated fly tipping task force. It should make better use of cameras, AI and reporting data, and partner with Keep Britain Tidy to develop action plans and strategies to clean up Southwark. We know this works and has led to progress in other boroughs. But as I said, residents are part of the team, so the council should be looking for opportunities to harness their energy. Ward forums are great places to promote dialogue and rally community support. The council does have to talk to residents, explain and welcome feedback to do better. So committing to outreach through ward forums and agreeing shared priorities with residents would go a long way to countering the overriding impression, in my ward at least, that this council is just a bit rubbish at rubbish. So I encourage colleagues to support the motion unamended.
The guillotine is now falling as it's 10 p.m. or 10:01. The remaining motions are therefore deemed to have been formally moved and seconded. We shall now move to the vote on the motions and amendments. I shall now move to the vote on Amendment B.
Question.
Stand up, please, and address.
As we've started this motion, we would normally hear the amendment, is my understanding, but obviously, whatever your ruling is.
Yes, my understanding of the procedural rules is that at a point at which the guillotine falls, no further speeches are made in itself. Any amendments or new motions are deemed to have been moved and seconded, and we proceed straight to a vote. I've just received advice that the only exception to that is unless if the guillotine is extended by the meeting itself. Okay, I will now move to the vote on amendments. I'll now move to the vote on Amendment B to motion 2. Those in favor of Amendment B? That is 42. Those against? 7. Any abstentions? None. The amendment is carried. I shall now move to the vote on motion 2, the substantive with its amendment. Sorry, yeah, with its amendment included. Those in favor of motion 2? 42. Those against? 7. Any abstentions? None. The substantive motion is carried. We will now move to the vote on motion 3. I shall now move to the vote on Amendment C to motion 3. Those in favor of Amendment C? 42. Those against? 7. Any abstention? None. The amendment is carried. I shall now move to the vote on motion 3. Those in favor of motion 3?
Unanimous.
That is carried unanimously. We will now move on to the reports part of the agenda. Item 6.1, Treasury Management Outturn 2002 to 2003. As the guillotine is now falling, we have 15 minutes to debate the report. So, very well. We now have 15 minutes to debate the report. I have Councillor Stephanie Crine who wishes to speak on the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Treasury Management Strategy is something that comes to Council Assembly twice a year. This report for this month actually outlines our final position for the last financial year. I think it's really fair to say that the last financial year, we had a lot of financial uncertainty, and the economic outlook for the UK and the world in general was quite traumatic and had a lot of turmoil. We had the war in Ukraine. We then had the absolutely disastrous mini budget of Truss and Carten, which absolutely knocked this country for 6. You know, an afternoon's damage, which we are still feeling the repercussions for, and absolutely further proof of the fact that the Conservatives just cannot be trusted with the economy of this country around that. And this, as a result of that, we're seeing high inflation, and we're also seeing increasing interest rates. And this volatility remains for the current financial year. Although inflation is predicted to decrease, I really seriously don't believe that it will meet the OBR's predictions around that. I think the Bank of England predictions are more likely, which are around 2% higher around that. And as a result of that, we are continuing each month to see the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee raise interest rates. And that has implications on us as a council for our borrowing, because we have to borrow as a council to deliver all the large capital projects that we and our residents want to see. Things like our leisure centres, investing in our schools, investing in our council home building projects as well. But I'd like to say that despite this background, we have kept within our fiscal responsibilities. We have met our prudential indicators, and we continue to be a well-managed and well-run council. The future outlook is still, as I said, quite precarious, but I'm really confident that the work the officers are doing with me around this is that we will still meet our commitments. We will keep our financial prudence around that, despite very, very challenging circumstances. So I'd just like to actually recommend this report to Council Assembly and hope that everybody supports it.
Thank you, Councillor Crine. In the absence of any other members who wish to speak on the report, I shall now move to the vote on the report recommendation. Those in favour of the report recommendation? Okay, the substantive motion is carried. We'll now move to item 6.2, the new Civic Award Climate Champion Award. As the bulletin is now falling elsewhere, we have 15 minutes to debate this report. Do any member wish to speak on the report? Councillor James McCash to speak on the report. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I won't use all 15 minutes on this, but I do want to cover some of the key points I missed out earlier about streets of people. No, I'm joking. But before I start, I just want to say to Councillor Bentley and Councillor Watson, I am very, very willing to come and walk around your ward with you and to look at how it can be cleaned up more. Your experience is clearly not the experience that I've had, and I'm very keen that we work collaboratively to make sure our borough is beautiful for the benefit of all people. So the Civic Award for Climate Change. So this is across the borough. There are so many people doing such amazing work in tackling the climate, tackling this existential crisis that we face. You might think that the true reward for that is having a planet that can sustain human life. But we say no, actually, it's a civic award at the Southwark mayor-making ceremony. And that is why I'm proposing today that we introduce a new award that will celebrate the amazing work we do on green credentials, on making our planet beautiful, sustaining life, and enjoyable for all future generations. I won't use the rest of my speech, but I'm looking forward to what I'm sure will be a very full debate on this item. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In the absence of any further members wishing to speak on this report, I shall now move to the vote on the report recommendation. Those in favour of the report recommendation? The substantive motion is carried. We'll now move on to item 6.3, which relates to the waiver of 6 months councillor attendance rule relating to Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. We have 15 minutes to debate this report. The item is deemed to be formally moved. Do any member wish to speak on this item? Any member would have 3 minutes. No, in the absence of any member wishing to speak on this report, I move to the vote on the report recommendation. Those in favour of the report recommendations? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. That was the last item of business tonight for Council Assembly. Thank you.